This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. President, you can go ahead and start the meeting.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for coming to our special meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors. On behalf of the West Basin Municipal Water District, I'd like to greet you all in the spirit of water reliability and water use efficiency, and in the spirit of making water conservation a California way of life. I'm Director Harold Williams, and I'll be conducting this meeting for a few seconds, and then I'll turn it over to our General Manager, E.J. Caldwell. Before that, I will move right on into calling the roll and to see if we have a quorum. I see we have a quorum. Is that correct?
Yes, we do have a quorum.
Okay, then we will go on to public comment. And I'd like to make some comments before that. And I have some comments for the member of the public who would like to speak at this meeting. We expect staff's presentation to take a half an hour in length. To accommodate those who may not want to be or who cannot stay the entire time, we will ask you to please, we'll let you speak now rather than waiting until after the presentation. You can speak now. And for those members of the public who will stay the entire time, you will can speak after the presentation. And each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes, regardless of whether you speak at the beginning or the end of the presentation. So with that, I will now ask for any public comments outside of the presentation. Are there any public comments?
Yes, President Williams. Our Department of Administration is gathering a list of names for their queue, and she will lead us through this initial part. For those members of the public that wish to speak after the presentation, if you just let us know once your name is called, and we'll defer your public comment until after the presentation.
Okay. Very good. Then we'll move on to looking at the agenda. Item 4 on the agenda, presentations. We have none other than what's in the information calendar, and there are no action items. So then that moves us to item 6. And with that, I will give control of the meeting to our acting General Manager, E.J. Caldwell.
Yes, thank you very much again, President Williams. For the purpose of allowing anybody that is not able to stay for the remainder of the event, I was going to have Julie Fraser Matthews walk us through the queue of all of the public comments. If anybody would like to speak prior to the presentation, because it will last about an hour, the presentation. So for anybody that would like to make public comment before that presentation begins, now would be the time to do so. And so, Julie, if you wouldn't mind walking us through the queue, and if anybody would like to defer until afterwards, that's fine. But if anybody would like to speak beforehand, we'll take that now.
Certainly. And I see that Russ Lesser does want to speak now. So if you'd make your way to the podium.
Start?
And you can start.
Yeah, my name is Russ Lesser. I've lived in Manhattan Beach practically all my life. I'm a former mayor. I've also been on the board of directors of several environmental organizations concerned with the health of the ocean, such as Reef Check and the Cabrillo Aquarium. And as some of you already know, I'm kind of an outspoken proponent for desal. Here's some headlines that have appeared. 55,000 acres of farmland were fallowed each year since 2000 due to water cuts. The San Joaquin Valley used to be the breadbasket of the United States. Now it's turning into a dust bowl. Droughts are expected to be longer and more severe in the future. Water in Lake Mead is at a record low level. Drought crises in California, Brazil, Spain, and South Africa all suggest a future where water will be scarce. Here's other facts. There are presently more than 16,000 desal plants around the world in 177 countries. Polls show that about 80% of our population support building a desal plant, and there's been 68 new desal plants built in the Caribbean since 2007. West Basin has done a fantastic job you should all be proud of developing systems for recycling and reclaiming water. But you can't reclaim water you don't have in the first place. You have also invested millions of dollars in conservation that has saved more than 3 billion gallons of water. But this does not give us a reliable, locally controlled, drought-proof source of water. The opposition appears to be around 3 points. First is the cost. It's true that it's more expensive right now than importing water, but importing water is not cheap either. And the cost is coming down for a desal plant and going up for importing water, and water that's imported cannot be counted on in a drought. We're finding that out right now. Secondly, what's the cost of having enough water, not any water? Second, a complaint appears to be that, and this is a quote, the toxic discharge will ruin the South Bay. Now, the EIR and other facts have already proven that that's false and it's a scare tactic. The 16,000 plants around the world have also proven that. The third objection is we just need to recycle more, but you can't recycle what you don't have in the first place. I have spoken with the mayor of Carlsbad and visited his plant, also visited plants in Israel. The mayor told me that building that desal plant was the smartest thing that city ever did. We also got the plant in Santa Barbara, which is now expanded and helping supply water to Montecito. So bottom line is the cost of building this plant is well worth it. If you analyze what the paper said today, it's $500 million. The paper also said there was 1 million users. That would be $4 per month per user for 10 years. That seems very, very cost effective at having what I call a drought-proof supply of reliable, locally controlled water. Thank you very much, and I really hope you take this seriously and consider building this product as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
The next speaker is Andrea Leon Grossman.
I would like to speak
Andrea?
after the presentation.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I would like to speak after the presentation.
Thank you. The next is Lydia Ponce. Lydia Ponce. Moving on, Randy Duncan. Thank you. Doug Solomon.
I would like to speak now, please. Thank you. Some people on.
I'm sorry, did you want to
Timer started, so I'm
speak
waiting.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be starting the timer now.
Great.
Begin.
As some people are aware, primarily the board members, I am opposed to desalinization. I don't want to take any of my 3 minutes to refute Russ Lesser's comments, but I disagree with pretty much all of them. I just have a couple points. As a financial expert and a guy who does large capital investments, it's a fait accompli that your cost benefit analysis was going to say the benefits outweigh the costs, because you spent tens of millions on this for almost 20 years. So the first proposal I'd like to make formally, and I'll have to figure out how to do that, is that the nonprofits and advocates against desalinization be allowed to put up their own independent cost benefit analysis and have the board vote on the cost benefit analysis you do versus an independent cost benefit analysis. Second, I think cost benefit analysis should not focus on the subjective issues of water reliability, because we really don't know what's going on. There is a good plan. There's water on this side of the grapevine. We don't need this plant. So I think we really need to make this cost benefit analysis purely on a financial side. What is it going to cost to have desalinized water versus what does it cost to purchase it? And the other thing I would like to figure out how to formally propose, and I'm not a lawyer or expert in governance, is this is a horrendous amount of debt for an independent agency to take on and force on the ratepayers. I don't think this agency should be allowed to borrow $700 million to $1 billion, I'm assuming cost overruns, without having voter approval. So there should be some sort of initiative we could figure out how to put on the ballot to see if the voters want you to spend this money. And also, I will end with something that for an entity that does no bid contracts for running its water reclamation project to Suez, water recycling, that no one would say, or I don't say that Suez has done a great job, to have you folks put in public-private partnership that would run our costs up is truly terrifying if this board won't commit to a competitively open bid process for the public-private partnership. I'm done, Julie. That's all the time I need.
Thank you. The next speaker that we have is Charmin Evelyn. Would you like to speak now or when the item comes up?
I will speak now, thank you. Good evening, staff and members of the board. My name is Charmin Evelyn. I chair the Water Committee for Sierra Club. And, you know, like Mr. Solomon said, I'm not going to refute the other speaker's comments because his comments are actually not based in reality and they're not based on the numbers. However, what I will say is that despite making statements through the executive summary of West Basin's urban water management plan that West Basin projects to have sufficient supplies to meet demands under normal year supply and demand conditions, as well as in single dry year conditions, West Basin is still spending taxpayers' dollars on this ludicrous proposal of the Ocean Desal plant. Ocean Desal is still the most expensive option. Ask the people in San Diego, where the bills have gone up so high that a lot of them are at the poverty level. As per your presentation, there is no comparison of desal to cost sharing versus funding of local projects. Any cost-benefit analysis must include land pollution mitigation of the El Segundo site, which is contaminated. Before closing, that plant had 52 EPA effluent and other violations. Where did that liquid ammonia go? Obviously, it went into the soil. There is no cost-benefit analysis comparison to water recycling expansion. Though the presentation cites Ocean Desal as long-term water reliability would be improved as a result of the rainfall independent and drought-proof OWDP. Just for the record, so would DPR, IPR groundwater replenishment, and conservation, all while costing less because most of the infrastructure is already there. The board approved West Basin's urban water management plan. So why desal was not featured in that plan? You approved a plan where desal was not featured. Why the shenanigans? Is someone going to be making some money off of this? Why plug it in now? The costs are underestimated. No costs are assigned to marine, land, or health impacts. Slide 41. The concentrated brine and chemicals discharge will affect both marine life and swimmers and surfers. No detail on how the neutral impact was determined. Where is the detail of this cost-benefit analysis? Instead of funding the proposed plant from an operational surplus, West Basin is taking on increased debt, which of course will be passed to the ratepayer when cheaper alternatives exist. Ratepayers right now in California, because of COVID, owe billions of dollars in water debt. How is West Basin planning to balance the books? This is a skewed and unrealistic cost-benefit analysis if it is not being compared to alternatives.
Excuse me, Ms.
As
Evelyn.
an Enviro, Sierra Club will work with Basin when it comes to new
Excuse me, Ms.
alternatives,
Evelyn.
but not with this
Ms.
Ocean
Evelyn,
Desal plant.
your time is up. Would you please wrap up your comment?
I'm done.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Wendy Phillips. Would you like to speak now or when item 6A comes up?
I'll speak now. I'm not sure of my timing, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak before. My name's Wendy Phillips. I am a 30-year resident of Manhattan Beach. When I wrote a letter 3 years ago in opposition to this project, I had understood from the draft EIR that the project costs were on the order of $380 or $385 million. I flipped through your handout today, and I was startled to see that you're up at 514 million, if I'm reading this page 23 correctly. So that's a 35% increase since you put out that EIR. My objection to this is consistent with what the prior speakers have mentioned. You're saddling ratepayers with very high fixed cost and also high operating costs to go with that. I also believe, as other speakers have mentioned, that there are more cost-effective ways to produce comparable amounts of water through conservation. I think that better, more effective demand-side management can produce an equivalent amount of water at a cheaper rate. For example, pricing. I don't think that the tiers are set aggressively enough. They're not sending a price signal to the households, to my neighbors, to the people in the district. I think that the rebate programs could be marketed much more effectively. People really are oblivious to them. I also want to mention that I am a former state worker. I used to work for the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And I am aware that you're proposing to construct this project on a very contaminated site. I think the cleanup's been done in a piecemeal fashion, and I'm really not clear on the cleanup status here. And I didn't see any information on that in the draft EIR, and hope that, would like clarification whether or not this has been included in your cost analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Connor Everetts. Would you like to speak now or at the item? You'll wait. Thank you. The next speaker is Joey Downey. Joey Downey.
Yes, I'd like to speak now.
Okay, please begin.
I just want to say that building desalination plants in a contaminated site must be the most idiotic thing that I have heard. All of you sitting in those chairs have already condoned a sexual predator to keep his job. And now you want to push this desalination, which is the most costly procedure you can take for cleaning water. There are various other projects you can pursue in trying to figure out how to do this correctly without doing damage to the environment and putting the bill and the strain on the cities. So I am going to tell you, we are watching you. We know we're going to check your donors, and we're going to make sure that anyone who has a connection to this desalination project is held accountable by the law for conflicts of interest and gift of public funds. And we are going to launch a media campaign against you. Do not think that we are not watching you. Do not think we're not aware of the politics going behind the scenes. There's no reason for a desalination plant. Try pursuing other routes. Do it, please. Last but not least, I do want to mention that I am heavily disappointed that you guys have done nothing about the sexual predator that still kept his job because of you all. If you guys are not willing to show standards in the most basic fundamental concepts, then I sure as hell do not believe that you are willing to do the right thing for the community. And I'm pretty sure that this desalination plant is an attempt to not only appropriate those properties at the beach, but to make money out of it. So once again, we will hold you accountable. We will launch media campaigns against you, and we will make sure that anyone who is taking money or about to get benefits out of this is held accountable to the highest standard of the law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Yvonne Martinez Watson. Would you like to speak now or on item 6A?
I would like to speak later.
Thank you. The next speaker is Martha Camacho Rodriguez. Would you like to speak now or during item 6A?
Yes, I'll speak now. Thank you. So ocean desal remains the most expensive and impactful way to enhance local water supplies. So one of the things that we want to really focus on is that this is a chance for West Basin to rethink their focus on ocean desal, and the environmental community would welcome working with the agency on other alternatives. Immense changes have happened since the project started moving forward in earnest, and even since the FEIR was certified. For example, MWD's UWMP demonstrates that the agency can meet its water needs without desal. Major wastewater recycling, groundwater remediation, and stormwater capture projects are all moving forward. Expanding the Edward C. Little recycling plant, advancing DPR legislation versus the cost of ocean desalination and its harmful impact and carbon footprint has no comparisons. One continuously harms the environment for the life of the plant, the other does not. They both have a carbon footprint, but one can be used to help the environment and the other one only causes harm. There is no cost-benefit analysis comparison to water recycling expansion. Though the presentation cites ocean desal as long-term water reliability would be improved as a result of the rainfall independent and drought-proof OWDP. Just for the record, so would DPR, IPR, groundwater replenishment and conservation, while costing less since the infrastructure is already there. A local OWDP would enhance water resiliency as given its lower and differentiated seismic risk compared to imported water supply. Again, there are the cost comparison to conservation, groundwater replenishment, and DPR. This is a skewed and unrealistic cost-benefit analysis if it isn't being compared to alternatives. We appreciate the leadership at West Basin that has shown on water recycling and UWMP that we think charts out a better course for this agency and other steps to take for a sustainable, low carbon and affordable low water supply. And we remain committed to work with West Basin to further these alternatives over unnecessary, expensive, energy-intensive, and environmentally harmful ocean desal. Any cost-benefit analysis must include accurate and complete ground pollution remediation expenses for the proposed location of this plant, which is expected to be significant and unavoidable and potentially understated in cost and time to complete. Per the EPA, aqueous ammonia was used at the El Segundo generating station, which is the site earmarked for this desal plant. Aqueous ammonia was used in the water treatment system for pH control. Aqueous ammonia is classified as a toxic chemical subject and was stored on site. EPA data reporting and monitoring violations, but do not indicate any actual discharge of the pollutants because reports were not filed. The El Segundo facility has been out of
Camacho Rodriguez.
Yes.
Your time is up. Please wrap up your comments.
Okay, so you have been out of compliance in 10 of 12 quarters. So what is the true cost of soil mitigation between 2004 to 2008, 37 effluent violations and 15 other violations? That's 52 violations total. Does the cost benefit analysis account for the remediation of that site? And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Craig Cadwallader. Would you like to speak now or at item 6A? Thank you. And the next two that I have, President Williams and members of the board, are two that have emailed and asked that we read for the record. Would you like me to read them now, or would you like me to read them during 6A? Okay. And if I could, Andrea Leon Grossman, are you on the line? We did
Yes, I
call
am.
your name earlier. Would you like to speak now, or would you like to speak at item 6A?
Yeah, after the presentation, I'd like to speak after.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item or the speaker that I have is Connie Zupo, Z-U-P-O. She says, greetings, I am in opposition of a desalination plant in El Segundo, but I do support expanding recycled water piping and facilities across South Bay. It appears South Bay has a recycling water supply and demand issue based on the recent West Basin press release linked below in my references. My understanding is West Basin purchases some of Hyperion's recycled water and then redistributes the recycled water through the South Bay recycled water purple pipes. The West Basin notice states the source of the West Basin's recycled water influent has changed. West Basin has taken the extra steps of blending its recycled water with drinking water to reduce turbidity, e.g. cloudiness, and odor that may temporarily occur as the City of Los Angeles works to fully restore the Hyperion plant. I have a couple of questions and I am wondering if these could please be answered. What exactly does the press release mean? Is the Hyperion plant releasing recycled water that isn't fully treated and high in total suspended solids and odor? If West Basin is having recycled water source issues, what is being done to expand additional recycling water sources? And lastly, why is West Basin wanting to build a desalination plant if we have a shortage in recycled water? And those questions that were asked were responded by staff in an email. The next speaker I have, bear with me a moment. It was emailed to me from Cynthia Jackson. These are public comments I would like to distribute to the board and read aloud during the meeting. During public comment at the August 2nd, 2021 special board meeting, item 6A. 1, desalination costs are underestimated. No costs are assigned to marine, land, or health impacts per slide 41. The concentrated brine and chemicals discharged will affect marine life, surfers, and swimmers. There is no detail on how a neutral impact determined or if any environmental externalities were considered. Number 2, there is no comparison of desalination costs to the cost sharing of other funding of local projects. Number 3, no consideration if the 20% potential gain by desalination is already offset by reduced demand due to conservation measures. Number 4, it appears that the benefit accrues to a very limited service area. As California American customer, I note that I have increased costs with zero benefit. Number 5, in light of the uncertainties of the future economy, it is fiscally irresponsible to take on unnecessary debt. Thank you for your consideration to my comments, Cynthia Jackson. And that concludes all of the speakers that I have at this time, but I would ask if there is anybody on the line virtually. If you would like to speak, please let me know now.
Yo quiero hablar.
I'm sorry?
Yo quiero hablar.
Okay. Go ahead and begin.
Bueno, sí, yo quiero decir que ustedes tienen que entender de que haciendo una planta para sacar la sal del agua es ridículo. No solamente es lo más caro que pueden hacer, no tiene sentido cuando hay más mejores opciones que no van a dañar el área. Estamos en una crisis global donde el agua se está acabando y las tierras se están contaminando y estamos perdiendo vida en el mar. Haciendo esto que va a causar más daño y va a destruir todas las aguas, eso no es correcto. En vez de hacer dinero para ustedes mismos, deberían de concentrar sus decisiones en ayudando a la comunidad. Si quieren, pueden sacar agua del aire con mecánicas que ya hacen eso. Eso puede costarles menos. Aparte de eso, el área está bien contaminada. Ya oí muchos gente hablando de la contaminación de amonía que está en la tierra ahí y las violaciones que esa área tiene. Así es que tirando el dinero por gusto nunca va a servir para la comunidad y ustedes tienen que hacer lo correcto y no tratar de construir algo que ni le va a beneficiar a la mayoría de la población, a que le van a estar robando el dinero a ustedes. Ustedes son predadores que ayudan a más predadores a mantener su trabajo allí y todos ustedes son responsables. Cada uno que está sentado ahí es responsable. Así es que les vamos a decir que los estamos vigilando y vamos a asegurarnos que la ley se cargue de todos los que están violando las leyes y están haciendo corrupción. Gracias.
Thank you. And those comments will be transcribed for the minutes for the record. So I'll turn this back over to the Assistant General Manager.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Fraser Matthews. The next item that we have on the agenda is item 6A under our information calendar. It is related to staff's evaluation of the costs and benefits of implementing ocean water desalination as a local drinking water supply. Today we have our Executive Manager of Engineering and Operations, Mr. Barkev Messerlian. He will be introducing a team of consultants that have been working on this, including those from GHD Advisory as well as Raftellus. So with that, I'll be handing it off to Barkev.
Good evening, President Williams, board members, and members of the public. As EJ mentioned, my name is Barkev Messerlian, and I'm the Executive Manager of Engineering and Operations here at West Basin. Today, we are happy to provide an overview of a study that we have been working on for quite some time, and that is the evaluation of the costs and benefits of implementing an ocean water desalination project, a project that has been considered and carefully studied by West Basin for about 2 decades now. The cost-benefit analysis consists of 6 volumes or chapters, all of which can be downloaded from our website, westbasin.org. You click on water supplies, then ocean water desalination, and then cost-benefit analysis. You should see all the documents on that web page. The 6 chapters combined are about 350 pages, consisting of 82 figures, 86 tables of technical analysis and data. At this workshop, we are going to try to do the report justice and provide an overview of its key findings. The PowerPoint presentation, as was said earlier, would likely go for about an hour, but we view the data provided in this study as a critical piece of information for our decision makers. As we've heard from the comments, a lot of folks know that there are costs associated with ocean desalination project, whether it's power costs, financial costs, or other impacts. And a lot of folks know that there are some benefits associated with such a project. And the questions before us are, do the costs outweigh the benefits, or do the benefits outweigh the costs? And does one outweigh the other, specifically for this region? And does one outweigh the other at this period of time? The analysis, the cost-benefit analysis, the overall goal of it was for us to design a report and provide cost information, benefit information for our board that will hopefully help form thoughtful answers to such questions. On the next slide, here we go. History shows that West Basin's board has always taken a stepwise approach towards carefully and responsibly evaluating an ocean water desalination project in its service area. West Basin's thorough analysis has included extensive pilot testing between 2002 and 2009, followed by a demonstration facility from 2010 to 2014. And West Basin has supplemented these efforts with numerous technical studies and a program master plan that was prepared in 2013. Each study prepared by West Basin was built on the conclusions from previous studies to ensure a thorough understanding and accurate analysis of the potential project. The pilot project provided data that informed the design of the demonstration facility. The demonstration facility evaluated the performance of reverse osmosis equipment, investigated the feasibility of using wedge wire intake screens in an open ocean environment, and assessed energy consumption. In addition to these major efforts, approximately 30 other studies have been prepared to date related to ocean water desalination, addressing a range of technological, environmental, and economic factors. West Basin's Intakes Effects Assessment Report, prepared in 2014, evaluated effectiveness of wedge wire screens designed at reducing and eliminating impingement and entrainment impacts. A high salinity sensitivity study in 2013 evaluated potential of short and long-term exposure effects of high salinity discharges on marine organisms. A water quality integration study in 2014 showed that stabilized desalinated water can be successfully integrated into existing potable water distribution systems. An ocean water desalination program master plan prepared in 2013 determined that local demands at that time did support the implementation of the project. Subsequent to all these efforts, in 2015, West Basin began the process of evaluating the environmental impacts of the project per the California Environmental Quality Act. As you can see in the next slide, preparation of the project's environmental impact report, or EIR, spanned 4 years, providing several opportunities for the stakeholders and the public to weigh in on the project. It is also worth noting that the final EIR also included 4 additional technical studies prepared in response to the draft EIR. There was a study done about the ESGS site that determined the lowest expected potential entrainment of larval fish compared to 2 other sites. Another study confirmed the salinity from operational brine discharges from a particular brine diffuser design would be within limits allowed by the Ocean Plan Amendment. A study of potential coastal hazards confirmed sea level rise will result in increased coastal flooding and erosion at the site, and recommended hazard management strategies to accommodate an ocean water desalination facility. A 4th study addressed the feasibility of using subsurface intake technologies. That analysis confirmed that none of the 7 subsurface intake technologies are recommended on the coast of Santa Monica Bay due to several factors, including local geology, hydrogeology, groundwater quality, and recreational values of the local beach. Now, while such technologies were deemed technically infeasible, West Basin staff chose to cost estimate and assess the financial feasibility of one of the subsurface technologies in this cost-benefit analysis, both for comparison reasons and because the cost of implementing one of these technologies could be yet another critical piece of information for our board, for potential permitting agencies, retail agencies, and for the public. So on the next slide, you will see that in November 2019, the final environmental impact report was complete, and the West Basin board certified the final EIR in November 2019, but directed staff to look into 5 conditions. The first condition was related to securing relevant permits. I'm going to jump to the 5th condition, and that's the development approval of design and project delivery documents. For conditions 1 and 5, staff has since taken a measured approach towards these 2 conditions and developed some analysis for both the permitting and the engineering side of things. Again, just a measured approach with some analysis over the last couple of years. So instead, there has been a focus to address conditions 2, 3, and 4. 2 alludes to the development of cost estimates. 3, evaluating a financial condition of the district. And 4, preparing cost-benefit analysis. The cost-benefit analysis that we will present today, goal of it is to address those three conditions, 2, 3, and 4. On the agenda today, we're going to talk just a little bit of what the project entails, some of the elements of the potential project. We're going to again dive into some of the specific objectives of the cost-benefit analysis before going into some of the findings. At the end, we'll try to summarize the results before concluding the presentation. With me here today is to present is Alejandro Cano, West Basin Water Resources Engineer and Project Manager, leading our ocean desalination program efforts for the last couple of years. Mark Donovan, Senior Water Process Engineer and Project Manager from GHD. Mark has over 20 years of experience in reverse osmosis desalination project and was part of the engineering team for the Carlsbad desalination plant. And he's also part of a team working on the Doheny desalination plant by the South Coast Water District. Nicole Kurana is the GHD senior advisor behind a lot of the analysis we will be presenting today. And Sanjay Gore is the task lead for Aftelis' team, which worked on the financial condition assessment and affordability analysis. Without further ado, I'm going to be turning it over to Alejandra to talk about some of the project elements.
Thank you, Barker. Good evening, members of the board. As Barker mentioned, today I will be presenting an overview of the project description that was included in the environmental impact report for the ocean water desalination project. So in terms of location, West Basin, as Barker mentioned, evaluated multiple sites throughout different evaluations, and in the EIR, it was concluded that the most suitable and environmental friendly site is located within NRG El Segundo Generation Station power plant at the city of El Segundo. This is the only site that is within our service area that could be suitable for this type of project. The proposed ocean water desalination facility is adjacent in Vista del Mar in between El Segundo Boulevard and Rosecrans. For the overview of the project design, this could be breaking down into different systems. So we have on the left side the offshore system, which is underground, underwater, and the offshore system. Each system has two main components. So for the offshore system, we have the intake and discharge. I want to note here that there are, as it was mentioned before, different technologies that could be that could satisfy this process. But for the purpose of this project, the cost-benefit analysis, and based on the environmental impact report and that was certified and the project that has been approved, West Basin proposed an screen ocean water intake with 1 millimeter of open size and a discharge multi-port diffuser. For the onshore, we have the desalination facility and a distribution system. So just kind of like to recap here, the water will be intake through the screens with a screen velocity that is less than 0.5 feet per second, which is consistent with the ocean plan amendment. And it will go through the existing 12-foot diameter intake tunnels all the way to the ocean water desalination facility, where the water will have a series of treatment processes, like the pretreatment, which it will remove large particles of suspended solids, and it will go then through a reverse osmosis through a first and then a second pass in order to remove all the dissolved salts in the seawater. Moving along, then we'll go through a post-treatment, which the water will be adjusting the pH and stabilize the water, go through a disinfection process, and then it will go through the system through a distribution pump station all the way to the distribution system. While the brine from some of the treatments, like the reverse osmosis and other type of treatments, will send back into the ocean through an existing 12-foot diameter discharge tunnel, and it will be discharged back into the ocean through the diffusers. And the capacity of the treatment facility that West Basin is proposing is 20 million gallons per day of water. So what we have here is the water conveyance system. This diagram in general was included in the environmental impact report. I want to note here that through the EIR and as part of the environmental assessment, not only the local project with the 20 MGD was evaluated, but also the regional project from a programmatic level. So what you see here, what we see here is the water conveyance and some proposed alignments that was evaluated in the environmental assessment. For the purpose of the cost-benefit analysis and given that the project was certified for the local only, for the 20 MGD, the cost-benefit analysis evaluated here is the highlighted in yellow water conveyance. So the water from the ocean water desalination facility will head north through Vista del Mar and then head east through El Segundo Boulevard and will connect to the first 3 points of connections from Med until the intersection with Inglewood, which then it will head south through Inglewood Avenue, and it will connect to the next 3 points of connections from Med. So moving through the cost-benefit analysis, what we have here is the consultant's scope and objectives. The overall objective of the analysis is to first evaluate the potential costs, wholesale water rate implications, and the local and regional benefits that will be resulting from the implementation of a 20 MGD of ocean water desalination as an additional local potable water supply source for the district. So what we see here is the scope of work that has been divided in 5 sections. The first section, as Barker mentioned, is for the cost-related purposes. We have like a project design comparison between 2 project designs, and there were some assumptions that were developed that considers ocean desalination. The project designs will be explained later in the presentation. For the section number 2, the project delivery method and incentive evaluation, the team developed a project cash flow model that further consider and evaluate the potential delivery methods that could be utilized. In addition, the team identified and evaluated potential project risk and conducted a risk and value for money analysis. In section 3, what it was evaluated here is the financial conditions that the district have. So based on the current and projected obligations, the team evaluated these financial conditions, and from this baseline, evaluated different desalination scenarios that were considered to analyze how the financial conditions might be affected by the implementation of the ocean desalination project, considering future district obligations. In addition, this task includes an analysis of the district's availability to utilize the project delivery methods under the best case scenarios that were concluded in section 2, and how the financial conditions might need to be adjusted in order to adapt different levels of financial needs when utilizing the project delivery methods that were discussed in section 2. In section number 4, potable water demand projections were developed within the district service area through the study horizon. Based on these projections, then an appropriate structure rate for each of the project designs was calculated for the delivery methods that were concluded in section number 2. In addition, an analysis of rate implications was also conducted. Section number 4 includes a wholesale drinking water rate analysis, in which a potable water demand projections were developed within the district service area throughout the study horizon. Section number 5 is the cost-benefit analysis itself. and evaluates more tangible and intangible range of impacts that could be cost effective throughout the district service area for local and regional purposes. This section defines objectives, base case scenario, and project options. In addition, the team also conducted an affordability analysis that will be presented later in the presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to Mark, our consultant from GHD.
All right, thank you, Alejandra. Good evening, board members and members of the public. So I'm Mark Donovan with GHD, and I'll be explaining the project design comparisons and the cost estimates. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Alejandra mentioned, we're looking at two design cases, the current project design and the subsurface intake design. This graphic highlights the main differences between each design case. The major difference between the two is shown in yellow, where the current design case utilizes a screened seawater intake in conjunction with the existing power plant intake tunnel, and the subsurface intake utilizes a seabed infiltration gallery. The overall treatment processes are very similar, except the current project design utilizes a more robust treatment system of dissolved air flotation and GMF, where the subsurface intake design utilizes just a GMF. For the brine discharge component of the projects, the current design utilizes a brine diffuser system in conjunction with the existing power plant outfall tunnel. The subsurface intake design commingles the brine with the Hyperion wastewater treatment plant outfall and includes a brine pipeline. Next slide, please. Here you can see a visual of the existing power plant intake tunnel in blue and the existing outfall tunnel in red. In the current design, the intake tunnel will be equipped with intake screens with slot openings of 1 millimeter, which is less than the thickness of a penny, in compliance with the California Ocean Plan. And the outfall tunnel will be equipped with a series of brine diffusers that result in rapid dilution of the brine with ambient seawater. For the subsurface intake design case, we have assumed a seabed infiltration gallery, which will be used to intake all the water required for a 20 MGD desalination facility. We have also assumed the brine could be commingled with wastewater from the Hyperion wastewater treatment plant. Both of these project elements meet the preferred technology under the 2015 California Ocean Plan Amendment. However, we want to be clear that the use of a subsurface intake design was previously found to be not feasible due to technical challenges, and that will be included in this analysis for cost estimate and comparison purposes only. We still do not recommend a subsurface intake. Next slide. Okay, so now we will review the cost estimates for each design case. So here are some basic project design assumptions. For the current project, we've assumed a first year of operation of 2028, mainly because of an extended permitting time of approximately 5 years. For the subsurface intake case, we've assumed a first year of operation of year 2025, assuming a more streamlined permitting process. Both would have a construction period of 3 years with an operation life of 30 years. Next slide. And here are the costs associated with each design case in 2019 dollars. You can see that for the construction and the upfront costs, the subsurface intake design cost is approximately $240 million more expensive than the current project design case. All other project component costs are pretty similar, both in terms of mitigation costs and long-term O&M. Next slide, please. Yep. And here's a further breakdown of the capital costs for the two cases. And you can see the orange color bar on that subsurface intake. That's really where the majority of the additional costs come from, that large cost of the subsurface design. And the pie chart on the right shows the breakdown of operating costs. Like most seawater desal projects, power costs make up approximately half of the overall annual operating costs. Thank you very much.
Good evening, all. It's Nicole Karana here with GHD Advisory. Good evening, board members and members of the public. So I'll be spending the next 10 minutes or so talking about task 2 of our analysis, which was related to financial modeling and delivery model analysis. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the objectives in this part of our study were twofold. Firstly, to take the many cost elements of the project and integrate them together to understand the cost profile for the whole project, to build, finance, operate, and maintain the ocean water desalination project, and to understand the financial outcomes, such as the cost of water over the project life. Second intent was to estimate the difference in cost of water and risk allocation that can be expected depending on what delivery model is used to deliver this ocean water desalination project. And these delivery models are different ways that the district can consider to structure and contract with the private sector to deliver and finance this project. This type of analysis is also sometimes called a value for money analysis. A methodology is summarized on the right of the screen there. And so firstly, a project cash flow model was developed in Excel to tie together the estimates of capital, operating costs, escalation rates over time. It calculated debt and equity repayments to finance the project. And we also built up a model of our do nothing project alternative, namely the cost of importing water from Metropolitan or from Met. The second step there, the risk analysis step, investigated how the different project delivery models could reduce the district's risk in delivering the project by transferring certain risks to the private sector. To do this, we identified major project risks and then built estimates of their consequence, likelihood, and allocation, importantly, under different delivery models. Our approach was quantitative. It involved Monte Carlo probabilistic modeling to determine statistical metrics of the risk and the overall project outcomes, such as median and 90th percentile costs once risks are considered. Today, in the discussion, I'll be mainly focusing on the cash flow modeling, and I'll focus on summarizing the results from the risk analysis step. So just before we get to results, we'll just briefly describe the different project delivery models, which you can see there in the table. So there are 4 models that we considered. The first one there, design, bid, build, involves the district developing the project concept, permitting it, owning and financing the construction of the new assets. The district would contract with a firm to deliver a final design for the project, and then with a different firm to construct the project. And the district would need to coordinate between those two parties. This model is common for traditional water infrastructure, and many projects are delivered by this way, or in this way by West Basin already. For example, projects on the recycled water portfolio. However, this is not an industry accepted model for desalination projects at this scale. The second delivery model there is design, build, operate, maintain, in which a single agreement is signed for design, construction, and operation of the plant. And we'll see that this is a preferred model with a good balance between financing costs and risk transfer to the district. It's a common approach for desalination projects here in California. For example, it was the model used for the Santa Barbara project and is being proposed for the Tahini project. You can see there, the next model is a PPP, or a public-private partnership. In this situation, the district would sign a single contract to take the project forward, but would commit to purchasing a minimum volume of water each and every year. In this model, the contractor can pursue the permitting step on behalf of the district. And this was an approach used for the Carlsbad project and is being, and also for the Huntington Beach project, which is still being proposed. We did look at one other delivery model, design, build, finance, operate, maintain model, which seeks some partial or full private financing, but does entail significant complexity. And we found in our analysis that this model didn't offer any risk or cost benefits to the district. And so to streamline the presentation today, we're not going to present the results, but they are available, of course, in our supporting documentation. So here we come to the first set of results from our analysis. And so the chart on your screen, what it's showing is the estimated cost of water, estimated cost per acre foot of desalinated water produced from the ocean water desalination plant. The results shown there are for the current project design and for a design, bid, build, or design, build, operate, maintain project delivery model. So you can see that the cost of water, the pink line there, begins in 2028, which is the first year of operation, the first year that plant operating costs would be incurred, and the first year of capital repayment obligations. The cost of water in that year is estimated at $2,983 per acre foot, which is higher than the green line shown there on the screen, which is our estimate of the net imported water rate in that year at around $1,500 per acre foot. So just to describe that green line in a little bit more detail, that's the net imported water rate against which we're trying to compare the cost of desalinated water. And so that line there is the sum of MET's full service treated volumetric rate and its readiness to serve charge. And these are the cost components that the district incurs and passes through to its retail agency customers. And these are the particular costs that would be avoided should the desalination project be used to deliver that volume of water instead. The project life is 30 years, so you can see that the pink line extends out to 2057. And just a comment there, after year 25, there is an apparent step up in the cost of water, and that's there circled in blue. And that's related to the fact that we factored in 25 years worth of rebates that are offered by MET's Local Resources Plan program, or LRP program, which is equivalent to $340 per acre foot of desalinated water production, but is applicable for only the first 25 years of operation. So if we move on to the next slide. So in this slide here, what we have done is added in cost of water estimates with the other delivery models of interest that I described earlier. So the one that you've seen from the previous slide is shown there in the thick pink line. So the public-private partnership model, as you can see there, does appear to have a substantially higher cost of water, mainly driven by the higher financing cost required by the private sector partner to cover its cost of debt and equity, and its risk premium for taking on the project. In addition, we have another lower cost scenario shown there, the lower pink line, and that represents a scenario where the district successfully secures a low cost financing option. And we model this as a drinking water state revolving fund, or SRF loan, which is a low interest loan with 30-year repayment. And these programs, and this program specifically, offers an interest rate substantially below the rates for traditional public municipal financing. We have assumed there that half of the project capital is financed through that loan, with the remaining 50% of the project being financed by municipal bonds. So as you can see, that cheaper financing option brings the cost of water down and closer to the MET imported water rate. And just as a side note, that SRF, State Revolving Fund loan, and other low-cost government programs are only available to projects that are district-owned. So therefore, a PPP would not be eligible for such a loan. And generally speaking, a model in which the district owns the assets and delivers a project is likely to have better access to low-cost loan programs. So what we saw there from the cash flow modeling is that as more private sector financing is introduced, the cost of water is estimated to increase noticeably. However, there is a flip side, and that is that those delivery models with more private sector involvement, they could enable the district to essentially outsource many of the project activities and reduce its risk exposure, so cost risk exposure. So that is, a PPP may appear to be more expensive, and it certainly is based on the analysis, but could it result in more cost certainty on behalf of the district, since the contractor, the private sector, would be on the hook for certain cost overruns depending on the final contractual arrangements. So this is the hypothesis, and so to test this, we developed a probabilistic risk model. We modeled uncertainty and risk events for the project, and we used our experience of contractual risk allocations for major desalination projects, and we estimated, or we understood where each risk was likely to be allocated, whether that's with the district or with the private sector. So focusing here on the results, in summary, so the DBOM model, the design, build, operate, maintain model, was estimated to provide the lowest risk-adjusted cost for the district and is preferred on that basis. The PPP delivery model did result in the most risk transfer away from the district, in other words, providing the most cost certainty to the district across the project life. However, it still had a higher risk-adjusted cost, suggesting that the PPP is unlikely to deliver the best value for money to the district. So we carried both those models forward, the DBOM and the PPP, forward for further analysis, and we eliminated the DBB, the design, bid, build, And like I previously mentioned, the design, build, finance, operate, maintain, they were eliminated from our analysis, and we continued on with our analysis. As a quick comment, when we did the risk analysis, the key project risk that emerged was power price escalation over the 30 years of the facility operation. So the points on the screen there really reiterate and summarize the main findings as I've just articulated. I'll add that our reporting has a host of supporting detail and analysis, and we've streamlined the discussion for the purposes of this presentation. And with that, I'll pass on to Sanjay to discuss the financial condition analysis.
Good evening, board member, staff, and public. I'd like to do my presentation associated with the financial condition assessment. Just want to confirm that you can hear me loud and clear. Maybe someone give me a thumbs up just to make sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So what we want to do today is evaluate the financial conditions of the agency, both before desal, without desal, and with desal layered in. We did that by developing a financial model that projected costs, increases, and the required revenues over the next 10 years to 2030. We also developed a financial model that went out to 2045 to take into account the full cost of desal, including when desal was offline, when the debt service is paid off. Can we go to the next slide, please? So based on the financial model, which takes into account working with staff and looking at all the different costs associated with operating, capital improvement associated with the recycling facility, R&R, we determined that a 10% increase in the reliability service to 2030 is needed to maintain the financial health of the district. We've also, as I mentioned, extended this analysis to 2065. By extending that analysis to 2065, an additional increase would be needed in 2041. Note that there is a gap there for 10 years where we are anticipating no increase is needed, but then from 2041 to 2065, a 5% is needed. These increases, again, as I said, are needed to pay for the financial condition associated with the CIP, or the capital improvement plan. Next slide. So right now, here's a visual graphic of the financial model that was developed. What we're showing you here is the bars, which are the ending cash balance of the agency. The line there, which says core target balance, is the reserve target. That's what the ideal, where the agency can maintain a reserve target near that. It's a goal. As you can see, from 2020 to 2025, the agency is meeting its reserve targets, and then there's a couple of years where it's below it, and then in 2030 it meets it and it maintains it. The reserve targets are a combination of 4 different types of reserves. If interested, we can go more into talking about that during the Q&A process. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we did extend this analysis out to 2065, and as I mentioned, both of these graphs are without desal. As you can see, the agency does generate quite a bit of ending balance in the midsection from 2030 to 2051, and thus in those years, not much of an increase is needed, none, and then there is an increase that's needed after 2040 of 5%. Next slide, please. So now we want to understand the implication of desal. So all these scenarios that we're looking at are 30 years. Desal will produce around 21,000 acre feet, or 20% of the demand on the potable side of the agency. There are 2 types of project designs, as one discussed currently is the current project design. We also did look at the subsurface intake design as a means of a benchmark, just to see what that means financially. As Nicole mentioned, there are different ways to deliver these projects. There's design, build, operate, and maintain. And the acronym we're using is DBOM. There's also where the agency basically takes on the risk, as Nicole mentioned. The next one is the public-private partnership, where we shift the risk over to a private entity. That's the PPP. And then the third option is the DBOM, where the agency takes on the risk and builds and operates and maintain it, but with the infusement of SRF loans, state revolving loans, which are very low interest rate loans. And if we can receive that, that'd be great. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did when we were looking at the financial situations associated with the agency is to see the implication of desal. What we would do with the desal is that we would pass that incremental cost onto the agency as a blended rate. And I'll be talking about the rationality of why we would blend that to the metropolitan rate and have basically a premium for desal. It does increase, as you notice the line there, the core target balance does increase because of the additional costs associated with desal, the debt and the capital. So that line does increase, as you notice, and you notice it from 2025 to 2031, there's below, but then eventually meets the reserve targets. It's normal for that to occur where you're doing a large investment in a project where you might be below the reserve targets and eventually catch up. If you notice in the out years also you're below the reserve targets, but then again you meet that, and the reason why the line drops in 2055 is because the debt service is off books. Next slide, please. So what we're showing you here is, so what Mark has talked about was the cost in today's dollars. Now what I'm showing you is the cost in future dollars. Basically, what do we anticipate the cost will be if we sum it out over the 30 years. So we have the debt service over here, over these three different these three projects, delivery methods. Where the debt service is 1.4, 1.9 billion, and 1.1 billion. If you notice, the SRF loan does give us the ideal or the lowest debt service amount. The operating costs are the same in all three scenarios. Then we have the capital repair and replacement needs and the total cost in all these three scenarios. For comparison purposes, West Basin Recycling Program over the past 26 years is estimated to be $1.5 billion. Next slide, please. So now what we're showing you is basically the cost of desal in the sense to the retail purveyors. And I'm going to eventually, in my presentation later on, talk about what the cost is to the actual customer, the end user. But right now we're just talking about first the retail purveyors and how much would that cost. So depending on the project and how it's delivered, the price range says the premium or the increase in metropolitan rates are shown here. This is based on current metropolitan rates. As you'll notice, if we can get the SRF loan, it's a 15% increase or $229 on top of the Met rate. Again, this would be a blended rate, and I'll be talking about the rationality why we would blend that with metropolitan. If it was a public-private partnership, then it would be a 32% or $484. And if it's just a normal loan amount without SRF, it would be a 22% premium or $326. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about how we should pay for desal and how should West Basin charge its retail providers associated with that. There are various options and methods of doing that. In order to understand which is the most appropriate method, what we want to do is take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the objectives of the study? What makes sense given the agency size and the criteria associated with that? So we go to the next slide, please. And so the guiding principles that we've developed in the study are these threefold things. First is ease of administration. We have a limited amount of staff, West Basin does. So we want something that's easy and simple to administer, something that we can work with the current billing system that we have. In addition, we want to minimize impact to retail customers to the extent possible. We understand that desal is a cost, but we want to, as much as possible, minimize that. Lastly, we believe that the benefit of desal should be spread equally, and so the cost should be spread equally to all the different retail providers. Next slide, please. So there are different approaches, as I mentioned, and these show the different options. One is you can blend it with the imported cost from Metropolitan Water District, so you create a blended rate. Second option is you could do a tiered rate, where the first tier would be imported water, the second tier would be desal. There'll be some challenges in the sense of how to allocate Metropolitan's allotment that West Basin gets to each of the retail providers. Another one is we could do a fixed variable option where the fixed cost could hypothetically cover the fixed cost of desal, and the variable would be the variable cost of desal. The fixed cost would have to be proportional out to each of the retail providers, and there would be some additional work that would be needed. The last one is a take or pay contract where it could be a contract for service associated with that. So based on the pricing objectives or the guiding principles, as I mentioned earlier, we did look at these different options, and if we can hit the next button there, we believe that the blended rate makes sense for West Basin, given the limited number of staff, given that we want to, as much as possible, minimize impact to retail agencies, and we want to spread the benefit and cost to each agency. Next slide, please. So although the cost of desalination is higher than imported, the overall impact to retail agency will be relatively smaller because because desal will make up approximately 20% of the total potable supply and will be blended. And the combining desal and imported water will be charged based on that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Sanjay. So I'll spend now this section talking about task 5 of our analysis, the cost benefit analysis. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the final stage in this evaluation was to look at the ocean water desalination project holistically and consider what other impacts beyond financial that this project may have on the district, its customers, the community, the environment, and the broader economy. These impacts can be positive, called benefits, or negative, called costs, or somewhere neutral in between. The overarching philosophy, as Barkev alluded to at the front of this presentation, is that once everything's considered holistically, an investment should be able to be justified if the expected benefits outweigh the costs. So in our analysis, we identified a range of impacts and categorized them and shortlisted them to focus our efforts. We analyzed the impacts whether qualitatively or by deriving monetary estimates as best we could within our available scope and timeline. And really, ultimately, the intent was to add extra information for the district's decision makers to consider. As such a major and complex project, there is no single metric or yes/no answer that we can simply state at the tail end of this analysis. So this diagram here summarizes the potential categories of impacts from the ocean water desalination project that were shortlisted by our team. In today's presentation, we will not dive into the detail on all of these and rather aim to give a summary overview of the key findings. But as you can see here, we considered a range of impacts in addition to just financial metrics. And there is supporting evidence and further discussion in our documentation available to the website. So moving on to the first impact here is to do with water quality and specifically reduced salt and minerals in the water supply that would occur if the OWDP is implemented. The desalination process design is expected to result in treated water with roughly half the salt concentration and roughly a quarter the concentration of hardness compared to the average current supply within the district service area. And there is an abundance of research and literature, specifically in the Southern Californian context, that analyzes and quantifies the benefits of this change. This includes a major salinity management study conducted by the Bureau of Reclamation and Met. And this and the other literature out there demonstrates that reduced salt and minerals can result in savings to households supplied with such water, even if somewhat diluted in the existing supply. And this occurs through mechanisms such as reductions in required maintenance on household appliances and hot water systems, reduced detergent use, and also reduction in point of use treatment systems. So in our analysis, we tried to conduct an estimate of this, and we arrived at an estimate of a net benefit in the order of $90 to $320 per acre foot of desalinated water production. Moving on to some other water quality impacts. So we reviewed literature and found some areas of increasing interest, investigating the impacts of desalinated water as they relate to medical and health outcomes. So the first item there on the screen, that stems from emerging research in Israel, which suggests some linkages between concentration of magnesium in water supply and overall cardiovascular health. Magnesium addition is not usually considered for desalinated water facilities, but can be considered during subsequent design stages of this desalination project, and we recommend re-reviewing the literature at that time since it is a dynamic field. Overall, it appears that any potential impacts can be mitigated during that process design phase subsequently. Second impact shown is also based on literature review, which suggests linkages between lower hardness water and decreased prevalence of atopic eczema, especially for children and young adults. This too is an emerging area of research interest, and we highlight it here for reference. Research to date suggests that lower hardness water would improve these outcomes, so would likely be a net benefit if implemented, but we've presented here neutral given it's a dynamic field. So here we have the final set of water quality impacts that we'll touch on today. So the first one there regarding emerging contaminants. As we know, there's increasing scrutiny on a variety of long chain organic compounds, including per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, and also pharmaceutical and personal care products, or PPCPs. And these compounds can be environmentally persistent and can have impacts at quite low concentrations. So reviewing the literature, what's evident is that the reverse osmosis process at the heart of the desalination process design is an advanced water treatment process and is extremely effective at blocking passage of organic compounds such as these. For example, the process has typical PFAS rejection of greater than 99%, and similarly so for PPCPs. And so really broadly speaking, the ocean water desalination project as an advanced treatment process would provide a safe supply of potable water and may also reduce the need for future investments in advanced treatment elsewhere, should there be regulatory or other changes that require removal of such contaminants overall for the region's water supply. The second one there, boron, just to go back to that previous slide. So boron in water supply, just briefly, it's known that could have impacts on horticulture and crops at certain concentrations and is a known risk in seawater supply. However, we see that this can be mitigated through careful process design, as has been successfully achieved at Carlsbad and other plants, and so that was assessed as a neutral impact. Similarly, contaminants from harmful algal blooms in the ocean are a known risk. It can also be mitigated through process design as well as operational practices. So we'll move on to the second major topic of water security, a key driver of this project. And just to clear up some definitions, so water security, as we use the language here, is the ability of water agencies, including the district, to maintain full service of potable water supply to the households and businesses that it serves. And so really security is the ability to withstand long and short-term disruptions to the supply. We talk about water reliability as the ability to withstand long-term threats, such as changing climate conditions and extended droughts. And water resiliency is focused on short-term acute threats, such as natural disasters, power outages, and equipment failures. So if we move on to the next slide. Water reliability is a well-studied and known challenge for Southern California. Rainfall and snowmelt that supplies most of the imported water to the region has been on a long-term downward trend, as well as becoming more variable. And a great deal of work has and is being done to plan for these challenges. And there is an overarching finding that there is a need to reduce the districts and the region's dependence on imported water, which is vulnerable to these threats. The ocean water desalination project would benefit water reliability because it is a rainfall independent and drought-proof source of drinking water with an abundant starting water source, namely ocean water. It's a local supply source for the district, able to supply roughly 20% of its long-term projected imported water needs. And indeed, the need to diversify the water supply of the region is a key pillar of water planning strategies, such as METS and the district's own urban water management plans. There are also existing guidelines and plans in place for water allocation and restrictions, if need be, during times of challenging water reliability. These mechanisms include the METS water supply allocation plan and the district's own drought rationing plan, which were enacted in the region in 2009-10 and also recently in 2015. So the way these mechanisms currently work, if drought allocations were enforced in the future at the regional level, then the district's customers would benefit from the desalination project because the district itself would be subjected to a smaller volume of restriction than if it did not have the plant. The amount of volume saving in that sense would depend on the extent of the regional shortage, but would not be equivalent to the entire output of the desalination plant, because under these drought allocation mechanisms, a portion of the desalinated water would really be allocated to the rest of the Met service region more broadly, reducing shortages at that regional level. So in summary, when thinking about water reliability, this project can be thought of as a partial insurance policy to improve availability of water should drought conditions return in the future. On the water resiliency side, we focused our analysis on the seismic risk facing the district supply. As we know, there are a number of active fault lines that are capable of affecting imported water conveyance infrastructure, in particular the southern San Andreas fault, which could lead to unavailability of imported supply. The ocean water desalination project, as proposed, is well aligned with MET's regional seismic resiliency plan, and it would offer resiliency benefits in the sense that it diversifies the geographic location and source of water supply to the district and the region. The seismic risk exposure of this project is from a different fault line, but at least 5 times lower than estimated for the imported supply. So in terms of the benefits of imported water security, they're derived from reducing the risk of economic consequences from total or partial water unavailability to households, industry, commercial enterprises, and agriculture. And by reducing amenity impacts and costs of water-based activities to residents and households, again, in times of water shortage. In this analysis, we did not value the water security benefit of each acre-foot of desalinated water produced. What we did was review literature to identify some benchmarks for thinking about the value of improved water security. So we have a couple of benchmarks shown there. And firstly, the first one there is the allocation penalty rates that are currently enforced under MET and the district's own drought allocation mechanisms. And these have values in the order of $14.80 or up to $29.60 per acre foot for excess water consumed by water suppliers and their customers during times of regional shortage. As you can see there, that's quite a high penalty for water use and provides one benchmark for thinking about the value of additional supply. Secondly, there we looked at some customer willingness to pay studies and surveys. Several Southern Californian water authorities, and including the district itself in 2015, have surveyed customers to understand their willingness to pay for reduced frequency and reduced severity of water restrictions. These surveys generally found that a high proportion of customers would be willing to pay for improved reliability, sometimes in the hundreds of dollars per household per year. However, and as we'll touch on this later, low-income residents would likely have a different perspective, and to that end, we conducted an affordability analysis as well. So a different set of impacts we looked at was economic stimulus, and we developed an estimate of the economic stimulus impact from the project on its surrounding economy. We used the in-plan data set and its economic multipliers derived from input-output modeling to estimate the job creation and gross regional product impacts to LA County, as well as the state of California. So this type of analysis looks to quantify indirect and induced economic activity that would be stimulated from the direct project spending. The numbers you can see there in the table show the economic stimulus impacts over the 3-year construction phase of the project. For the current project design, as we've discussed before, just to interpret these, so 613 job years as shown there for LA County over 3 years of construction. So you can think of it as roughly 200 full-time jobs per year during the 3-year construction period. And if we move on to the next slide, what we have there is the estimates of the economic stimulus during the operations phase, as distinct from the construction phase. So this is during each of the 30 years of plant operation, and the values that we've shown here, they're all in 2019 US dollar equivalents. So moving on to my final slide here, where we just summarize quickly some of the other impacts that we looked at in our analysis. Regarding the district's own internal management and organizational impacts, we know that the district would need to add and restructure some management and supervision roles internally to effectively manage the project if implemented. The project would make the district a potable water supplier and therefore subject to more stringent set of reporting requirements compared to its existing recycled water supply portfolio. And so for a design, build, operate, maintain model, the engineering, operations, legal, finance, compliance activities, we estimate may require an additional 7 to 10 full-time staff. Regarding environmental and amenity impacts, we deferred to the extensive process and findings contained in the project environmental impact report, and the extensive process to get there was discussed at the beginning of this presentation and has been approved and endorsed by the district. And finally, on the financial, we spent a bit of time earlier talking about the cost of the project, and that it does, or desalination water does have a cost premium compared to the existing imported water supply. The next part of our presentation, and I'll hand over to Sanjay in a second to cover this, what this quantifies is the really affordability of households in the district service area, particularly low-income households. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sanjay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next slide, please. So what we want to do now, as Nicole mentioned, is understand the cost of desal and the impact of household within the member agency retail service area on affordability. Now, the challenge here is affordability must first be defined. Affordability is a challenging concept open to interpretation. There are some standards out there that we look for. The first is a very standard one, which is the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has this affordability threshold as a median household income of 2.5%. So basically, if the water bill is under 2.5% of the median household income, the EPA states that's affordable. That's one metric that's commonly used in the water and wastewater industry. Now, the challenge, of course, with the median household income is that it may not represent the group of individuals that we're sort of focusing on. So there is another definition out there. Manuel Teodoro, a professor, did write an article in 2019 about water and sewer affordability in the United States. And the article argues that we should actually focus on the 20th percentile of income. So if you get all the people's income and you put them in a line in order, we should look at the 20th. And why the 20th? Well, he argues that the first group of people, the first 20th, they actually are, they can get federal assistance, they can get government assistance, so they wouldn't be as impacted by this. But once you reach the 20th percentile in income, then you don't qualify for a lot of federal programs or government assistance programs. And this is defined as the working poor. And this is the group of individuals that we should focus on to make sure that they can still afford water service. So that's what we did. His metric that he uses is what we're using is the 5% of income. He does argue that 10% for water and wastewater. Since this is a water study, we're just focusing on water, so we divide that by half, so we're looking at 5%. Just as a reference, the 20th percentile of income does differ in West Basin service area. For instance, Palos Verdes, which is a more well-off community, the 20th percentile is $64,000. In Lomita, which is the lower end, is 32,000. So we took that into account. Next slide, please. So the other factor that we need to take into account besides income of the different retail service area is the supply mix. Not everyone's supply mix is the same. Actually, they're very different. And these are the different retail agencies, El Segundo, Inglewood, Lomita, etc. Each one of them have a different mix of supply. Some are more dependent on imported water, such as El Segundo, 100% imported. So that means they're 100% dependent on West Basin and Metropolitan Water District. And then some agencies or communities are less dependent on it. For instance, if you look at Cadwallader, a private entity, they only need 61% imported, 39% groundwater. So the impact of desal only affects the imported side of the house. It would not affect the groundwater side. So we take that into account. So as I mentioned earlier, desal would produce 20% of the supply mix of West Basin. So for El Segundo, that means 20% of their water will be desal, 80% will be from imported water. For another community like Cadwallader, that'll be a different mix because only 61% of the 20% will be affected by desal. The 39% will remain the same. So we take that into account in our affordability analysis. Next slide, please. So we looked at ranges associated with affordability impact. We really want to make sure we understand the gamut of what this means. As mentioned, there are two different types of design project comparisons. There's a current one, there's a subsurface intake design. There's also different delivery methods, and they all have different costs as shown before. So again, what we did is we looked at what would be the best case scenario would be the current project, design, build, and operate with SRF loan, and what would be the higher end bound, that would be a surface intake private partnership. So we have the scenario 1, scenario 2, and then we look at those two scenarios to see what the implication is on affordability. Next slide, please. So right now, so I've talked about earlier on about the premium associated or associated with desal from the member agencies perspective, the retail member agencies. Now what we're looking at is we're looking at the actual bill increase for customers, and this is using 9 units of water, which is enough for indoor needs of a family of 4. So what we're doing here is we're looking at the no desal, that's a bill, like for instance, El Segundo, Inglewood, Lomita, as you see. And then you see scenario 1 and scenario 2, and you can see the increase associated with each scenario, where El Segundo will go up to almost $47 in scenario 1, or $57 almost in scenario 2. And you can see each one of your communities, whichever community you belong to, the price range associated with that. And again, it depends on how much of your community is dependent on imported or groundwater. Next slide, please. So based on that impact of the increase in the bill, then we layered in the income using the census data of income. And we want to understand, well, what does this mean? What does this mean to our community? So we look at the median household income, and we have 3 columns here. We have without desal, so this is the status quo scenario. What does this mean? Is anyone, have that higher than 2.5%? So without desal, no one is. And then even with scenario 1 and scenario 2, the household median income threshold that the EPA states is fine. I'm just give you a couple of numbers. The increases occurred was basically 0.2%. The highest impact was Cadwallader, Hawthorne, where the median household income went from 1.42% to 1.64%. Again, everyone was below that threshold. Now, the next slide dives into census tracts. So these are the number of tracts, and we actually could dive in to see how many census tracts don't meet that threshold. So under the status quo, as you know, there's a little yellow for Golden State Water. So 3% of the census tract is above the 2.5% already. With scenario 1, that would increase from 3 to 9. And then with scenario 2, it would go up to 18%. As you notice, most large majority of them don't show any increase in the threshold on the census tract. There are some that do have that. Next slide, please. So now we want to focus really on the working poor. That's that 20th percentile income, and really see what that means to these customers, this demographic of people. Again, we're looking at bills that are 5% of the income of this 20th percentile. We have, again, without desal, scenario 1 and scenario 2. The biggest increase associated was with Cadwallader Hawthorne, where it went from 2.91% to 3.3%, still below the 5%. The medium range was more around 3%, again, below the 5% threshold on a retail level basis. So again, next slide, we dive into the census tracts and we get a little more refined and just really understand what's going on. So Cadwallader, as Golden State Water, as I mentioned, 18% of that income, the 20th percentile of income, under the current status, don't meet the that definition of affordability. Increases, as you can see, by 3% to 21%, and then increases again to 26%. Cadwallader Hawthorne, as you know, stays the same in all three thresholds. So desal doesn't change the needle there, doesn't affect it. Inglewood, as you can see with scenario 1, there is some communities within Inglewood that are already having challenge with the water bill, but desal doesn't change that in scenario 1 and does increase it slightly to scenario 2 by 3% to a total of 7%. So based on this analysis, looking at the census tracts, looking at a heat map of the agency, it shows that while desal is more expensive than the current provision, desal water remains affordable for most retail customers based on the median household income and the 20th percentile of income. Now I'd like to turn it over to Barkev.
So directors, there have been quite a bit of information and numbers shared in this presentation so far. So before we conclude it, I'm going to take another stab at trying to summarize some of the key findings. On the next slide, you'll see key finding again is that the current design project, a 20 MGD plant, will cost around $514 million or $500 million. And the first year of operation would be around $19.5 million of reoccurring costs. Those costs would obviously be escalated as years go by. We talked about the two design projects, one that was technically infeasible in the subsurface intake, but we wanted to have it for cost comparison services and to see how that cost could have the higher bound of a desal project. And by going with the current design and using some of the existing infrastructure, there'd be a cost savings of $340 to $450 million whole of life cost savings for the project. So for cost of desalinated water is estimated at $2,629 per acre foot. But that again is based on the current design project, design, build, operate, maintain, delivery. It assumes that low interest loans would be secured for 50% of the capital cost, and it also assumes LRP funding from MET. So say the 50% is not secured, that $29 per acre foot goes up to approximately $3,000 per acre foot. Nickel talked about the different delivery methods or models, if you will, and concluded that a municipally funded design, build, operate, maintain, delivery provides the lowest risk adjusted cost. Although a public-private partnership would transfer risk away, it will likely result in a higher cost of water. When it comes to financial condition of the district, it's important to note here again, Sanjay talked about this, that in assessing the financial condition of the district, we evaluated revenues, expenditure, the capital improvement program assumptions over the next 10 years and the next 45 years. And there were assumptions, and those were the basis of these increases. And that was part of evaluating the baseline scenario for the district. So the 10% increase over 10 years, and then another 5% increase between 2041 and 2065. That is to sustain the district's current programs, including recycled water. The district can maintain its financial condition by passing through the cost of desalination water to its retail agencies. That was the conclusion of this analysis. When we talked about the rates, and Sanjay mentioned how the preferred pricing method would be a blended wholesale rate. So if we were to have that 26 or roughly $2,600 per acre foot of desalinated water cost, and you blend that by 20%, 80% supply mix with cost of imported water, which in year 2028 is estimated at around $1,500 per acre foot, you would get a blended rate of roughly $1,729 per acre foot. And so that, in comparison to the Met rate, would be a premium of $229 per acre foot. Again, that assumes that's a 15% desal premium. Again, if the SRF funding is not available, that 50% is more like something like 22%. We've evaluated the cost of the project over 30 years, and the net project cost for the project is estimated at approximately $1 billion, which is about $250 million higher to the net present cost of no project, just imported water, the status quo. Sanjay talked about the affordability metrics on the next slide here, and we looked at the different impacts at the different customer agencies, and the monthly rate impacts range from $1.43 for Cal American Water all the way up to close to $7 a month on the monthly bill. While more expensive than current water provisions, desalinated water remains affordable for almost all agency customers based on the thresholds of median household income and the 20th percentile of income. And finally, on the cost benefit analysis, Nicole went through some of the details, some of the costs associated with a project like this, the financial costs, the affordability, the risk transfer, environmental indemnity, organizational impact. And then we looked at some of the water quality impacts. We talked about the economic stimulus, and also back to the original goal of the district in looking into ocean desal, 20 some years ago, water reliability and water resiliency. So as I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, the cost benefit analysis again was prepared to provide critical pieces of information to our policy decision makers, who would ultimately determine whether this particular type of supply for this particular area and this moment in time is worth the cost associated with it. That concludes our presentation today. The team will be happy to respond to any questions the boards may have. EJ, back to you.
Yes, Barkev, thank you so much to you and your team for all the great work that went into this effort. This has been a multi-year effort. It's crossed lines in almost every department at West Bay Municipal Water District. So I don't want to exclude anybody, noting that finance, planning, operations, and engineering and admin have all been working on this. So I want to acknowledge that. Secondly, I do recognize that it is almost 8 p.m. We did warn everybody that this presentation could last more than an hour. At the chair's discretion, if you want to take a break, we can do that. If not, both staff and our consultants are ready and available for questions from the board. And I do know that there's several public comments that are waiting to be made.
Okay, well, thank you, EJ, and excuse me, Markev, thank you and your team for all of the work you've done on this project. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of work. And people say that we didn't do our due diligence in looking at this thing. They missed it. But it is late. But I would let our audience out there, would they like to have a break now, or would you like to stretch right through it? I heard one voice out there. Okay.
I'm ready
All
to
right.
speak.
Who was that?
This is Yvonne Martinez Watson.
I believe this is one of our public commenters.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So we will, if the board is on board with that, to keep going? All right, we'll keep going. Well, thank you. All right. We will go to the audience for their questions.
And for that, President Williams, I'll defer to Ms. Fraser Matthews, our Manager of Administration, to read back through our public comment queue.
Thank you, EJ. The first person in line for public comment is Andrea Leon Grossman.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead and begin.
Hi, my name is Andrea Leon Grossman. I'm the Climate Action Director with Azul. We're an environmental justice organization who works mostly with Latinos. I am a Mexican-born immigrant, and again, I'm an environmental justice advocate. Desalination is a bad short-term solution for a long-term problem. It's also racist. There's 3 reasons why this is should not happen. Desalination is the most energy intensive and expensive way to source water. It really sucks, literally. Millions of sea creatures are killed when you suck water out of the ocean. It dumps highly concentrated brine and toxic chemicals into the ocean. We cannot afford to do this. The ocean is not a profit center. It is not surprising that most proponents are white supremacists like Mr. Russ Lesser, who was the first speaker, who also opposes the initiative to return Bruce's Beach to the Bruces. And he likes such a destructive project that would hurt people of color disproportionately. As an immigrant, I am also appalled that your analysis failed miserably to consider undocumented immigrants and how are they going to pay their bills. That 20% threshold that you were talking about, undocumented immigrants are not eligible to apply for federal aid. So you missed the mark just gigantically. I guess I should not be surprised since you would not even provide an interpreter for the Spanish speakers who showed up to speak and express their concern for such a terrible project. I just really hope that you go back to the drawing board because the numbers are not adding up. I know that a lot of you just come from this white privilege background, and I'm just completely appalled, and I cannot express how concerned I am about your presentation today. It just failed in so many. I yield my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Lydia Ponce.
Hi, good evening. This is Lydia and I'm calling from Venice. And everything you just said for an hour and a half is absurd and obsolete and should be stricken from the record. You have not spoken to the local indigenous people. You do not have any reference to Tongva. You do not have permission to do any of this stuff because the UN has given the rights for the indigenous people globally to have fair, free, informed, and consultation, prior, not when you're building it, not after you built it. So you may as well just erase everything and write down, contact Tongva local tribal people. And if you need help doing that, you can take down my email, Venice Lydia, Lydia, @gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to facilitate that. But you have to establish your relationship with the people here, the stewards of the land. It is a shame and it is disgusting that all of you in the mega corporate extractive industries continue to ignore and deny Indigenous people their rights. Shame on you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Randy Duncan.
Good evening. Is 100 million gallons per day drinking water capacity desalination plant good or bad for El Segundo in the South Bay? That is the $1.7 billion environmental question. Let's review. On page 2 of the agenda, there were 5 goals. Goal 5 being the environmental stewardship, yet the only other mention of the environment in the packet on page 56 says covered in detail in the EIR. Under the umbrella entitled Total Impacts, page 46, I find it interesting that you have slides to address water quality, water security, economic stimulus. There's no reference to environmental impacts whatsoever under environmental and amenity, air, land, or marine impacts. Shouldn't environmental stewardship warrant at least a single page in your 74-page packet? I think so. My reference to the impacts, which actually include its air, land, marine, and recreation. My impacts to recreation are the documented facts around the world that great white sharks are attracted to waters that are 1 degree, well, the brine water that's dispersed is 1 degree warmer than the intake. It creates a warm water attracting sharks. The current project design is being marketed as a 20 million gallon per day capacity, yet it's being designed for a combined local and regional project, 100 million gallon per day capacity, 60% more production than depicted in the summary. The Carlsbad project cost $922 million for a 100 million gallon per day capacity plant in 2015. I'm the president of a company and I do cost estimating for a living. I prepared the budget for the LAX Landside Access Modernization Program. If I extrapolate your cost to the midpoint of construction in mid-2026, this is a real cost of $1.5 to $1.7 billion. How are you going to pay for it? You're going to increase the cost to the consumer. You're going to change the percentage of commitment of desal water from the 20% to 40%, 50 or 60%, again, passing on that on to the consumer. In producing 100 million gallons per day of the upward capacity of this plant, when it's done and you have a stacked configuration, you're going to be discharging 118.2 million gallons, approximately 20 football fields offshore. Why are you proposing the shorter tunnel, approximately 2,100 feet for discharge, and the longer tunnel for intake? Why are you telling the public it's a 20 million gallon per day production plant when your infrastructure is for 100 million gallon per day capacity local and regional plan? Why are you omitting the environmental impacts? Conclusion, West Basin's presentation tonight conveys information favorable to the viability of the project and sweeps under the rug or out to sea the significant negative environmental, air, ocean, land, and recreational impacts.
Excuse me, Mr. Duncan, your time's up.
I will wrap up. The public
you.
deserves to be more informed. The Coastal Commission, the city councils of El Segundo and Manhattan Beach deserve to be apprised of the total desalination story, the whole story with all of its barnacles. Thank you. And
Thank you. Our next speaker is Connor Everetts.
Thank you. Connor Everetts for the Southern California Watershed Alliance and the Desal Response Group. I've been coming to you all for a long time, for 4, maybe now 5 general managers. This issue has been around, and my first question is, what's the cost invested in desal already? What was the cost of this report itself? And that total investment, how could you have spent it so far to further what you've done a good job on, and I've always given you credit on your recycling program that could be expanded and your demand side conservation programs as well. The second point is the transparency in process. With Recycle, we were once part of a partnership. There was an advisory group. Will there be one for desal? We have asked for that before. We're listening to a report that kind of surprised us that it was happening in the short notice. So we're responding to it the best we can. We appreciate the opportunity, but it is not enough. Just a few points: that no water from imported water from Met does not include greater conservation and recycling, and the true value and cost of those as well. The two urban projects, Carlsbad and Santa Barbara, required 30 and 50-year take-or-pay deals to make them viable. You should consider that as well. Other plants have gone down without being built, including the city of Los Angeles with their own power plant, who could sell themselves electricity, which is a primary cost, at a much lower amount. Analyzing Southern California supply investments, a human right in water from a human right perspective, UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation should be reviewed in part of this as well. I would like to put that into the record. There is water debt from 70% of the respondents at the State Water Resources Control Board this year. In January, based on previous time, was 1.4 billion. It's continued to grow, with some agencies now applying late fees and shutoffs as soon as they are legal from the moratorium. Some are doing it before October 1st. Desal is a key part of those cost increase, especially in San Diego area, but is not transparent because of this blending of water supply costs. Be direct with what the true costs are. There's no guarantee of any subsidies like the SLO or the MWD LRP and others, so they shouldn't be counted until you have them. Boron has an impact on male reproduction, or as the Poseidon scientist said once, it shrinks male testicles. I don't know if people are aware of that, but it is an issue that's out there. The cost of removing boron is another pass, and that's expensive, and the industry has fought the standards because of that, the World Health Organization. I could go on, but I'd like to say what was often quoted to Mark Twain, or maybe British Prime Minister Disraeli: lies, damn lies, and statistics. There are a dozen other issues I want to know if we could actually, Doug suggested earlier, provide an alternative report and be able to do that. Are you still taking information, or is this moment at the public hearing the only time you're taking information on that? That's another question I'd like answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Yvonne Martinez Watson.
Good evening. My name is Yvonne Martinez Watson. I'm the chair of the Environmental and Social Justice Committee for the Sierra Club. I chose to wait until the end of the presentation so that I could observe the amount of public participation by non-English speakers. I'd like to remind you, West Basin's Administrative Code, Article 11, Section 6-2.1102, Purpose of Review, says that the purpose of review of EIRs and negative declarations includes, I'm going to skip ahead to Section G, encouraging public participation. Well, tonight a Spanish speaker made a request in the chat box to speak, and he was ignored until he felt it was necessary to interrupt the proceedings earlier to remind everybody that he was willing to speak. Based on that, I have the following comments. I'd like you to please provide real-time translation services for limited English speakers to both comment and participate in meetings. In regards to tonight's meeting, please provide a transcript of the public comment given in Spanish, along with the translation provided to the board. I would like to know, did your water affordability studies and surveys include people who speak other languages? Did your sampling include communities of color? What about renters? Water is life, especially during these tragic times as COVID-19 has had a severe impact on communities of color. Renters are now facing eviction due to the pandemic. This project fails to acknowledge the current economic hardships faced by communities of color hit hard by COVID-19. and the renters who face eviction. I would just ask you to please consider the fact that environmental justice is something that you need to be considering. And in this case, this water desalination does not add up. It will cost ratepayers money, and it will cost people who your cost analysis did not take into account. Landlords who pay their water bills pass those water bills on to their renters, and those people have not been considered in these analyses. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker we have is Craig Cadwallader.
Good evening, board members and staff. My name's Craig Cadwallader, and I hate to do this, but I have to make an observation. Mr. Masurlian did mention that there are reports available online. Those were referenced nowhere in the materials for this meeting. So I usually do a very deep dive into the detailed numbers so that I'm educated and I can ask informed questions. I look at this PowerPoint, I can't really ask questions on it. I don't know what it's based on. These items are on a website page that is not referenced in the agenda or in the PowerPoint or anywhere else. I happened to look at that after he mentioned it kindly, and I appreciate that. But this is really disappointing. I attend almost every single West Basin board or committee meeting, and I probably attend more meetings than any individual board member because not all the board members are on the other committees. Without this information, how can we ask intelligent questions? I'm at a loss. I don't know what to ask. I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I'd like to take a look at it, but you know, it hasn't been made available. Then last, and I really hate to bring this up, I spent right around 9 hours here for the board retreat in this very room. During that retreat, everybody was safely distanced, everybody was masked, and everybody took admirable precautions. Yet I look around the room here and I see people without masks, even though isn't LA County require masks in a closed interior place? And also a member of the audience is wearing his mask around his wrist like a pandemic prom corsage. And how is that safe? I don't know who's vaccinated or not. I am, but I do know that the recent reports are even vaccinated people can spread especially the Delta variants of the coronavirus quite efficiently. So should I risk my life to be here in person? I wanted to be here to interact with everyone. I have a great deal of time and devotion to this very important agency. There's nothing more important than water, but should I risk my life? You took more precautions during the board retreat when things weren't as severe now. The Delta variant was not there then. So enough of that, but I just wish that these materials, we could see those earlier. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda Bassett.
Hi, good evening. You know, I don't have any deep background in water necessarily, and especially not in a desal plant. But my common sense from what I do know about it and what I've learned here today just makes me say that this is just a dumb and bad idea. And what makes me very concerned is that I believe I heard you say that you've been thinking about this for 20 years. And it seems to me that you've already decided that that's what you want and that you're figuring out a way to get it to happen without listening to the people. Because as I've heard people say here, you really haven't brought it to very many people. I'm one of very few people that even know that this meeting is going on. I'm sure the general public has no idea this is happening. And to relate it to what's going on today, just because science, you can do what you can do, you can take the seawater and desalinize it, doesn't mean you should. We know our Earth is a very environmentally balanced. Well, you're going to take out all of that fresh water and then put back the salt, and you think that's a good idea? You think that the ocean and the environment are going to be able to handle that? There's going to be consequences. We're dealing with consequences of scientists who thought it was a great idea to figure out if they could change a virus and make it gain a function, right? Make it more spreadable to humans. And look where we are now. Just please stop. Figure out the right way, the practical way. I've heard people mention many different things here today. Just stop messing with our environment. Leave it the way it is and live with it. Someone mentioned the indigenous people. I believe that's the way they did it. I think we should go back there. Thank you very much. I hope you don't vote for this. I really hope you don't.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kelly Clark.
Good evening. This is Kelly Clark. I'm speaking on behalf of LA Waterkeeper tonight. Thank you for the presentation. It was definitely detailed. However, what it doesn't get around is the fact that desal remains the most energy intensive, climate impacting, and expensive way to obtain additional water supplies. And the presentation spent a lot of time trying to minimize those cost impacts. And it brought up different definitions of affordability and talked about, well, these are only a few dollars. But fundamentally, the issue here is the fact that we should not be paying any additional money for water that is not needed. Especially in West Basin, where you're well aware your service area covers very disproportionate levels of income as well as levels of water usage. And essentially, what this will do is you are forcing economically disadvantaged communities to subsidize the excess water use of wealthy communities. That is not right under any framework of environmental justice or social justice. There are also a lot of changes that have taken place since the EIR was approved. We have great strides being made in DPR regulations. Water recycling is coming even more to the forefront. And we're starting to see a change towards sustainable, multi-benefit ways of managing our water. Desal is an old solution to a problem that's still ongoing, where we have better solutions now. Also, the cost estimates in here all appear to be heavily dependent on subsidies that may or may not continue into the future, which means every cost estimate here represents an underestimation of what this will actually cost your ratepayers. And it makes no sense when West Basin has alternatives. Most of the project slides here compared desal to imported water. Imported water is a rough source of water. It is also expensive. It also impacts the climate. But we're asking you to look for better solutions. Look at hybrid uses of recycling, incorporating DPR, groundwater remediation and replenishment. There are better options out there you can be pursuing. And West Basin has been a leader in water recycling. You have the ability to expand your plant. You have the ability to continue to be at the forefront of water recycling, promoting a water source that is equitable and available for everybody. The most recent UWIMP charts a great path for the agency in terms of its ability to provide water without having to rely on this ocean desalination plant, which leads to the question of, if you don't need it, why on earth would you make your customers, your ratepayers, and your community pay for it? Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Rob Brailes. Rob, are you there? Rob Brailes. Not hearing anything. I would turn it back over to.
I don't believe I used all my time earlier. May I add on? Wendy Phillips here again. I believe I'm on solid ground when I say that the environmental impacts from desal are of great concern and controversy. I was taken aback that on page 56, there was absolutely no information offered on this. And when I made my earlier comments, I decided, well, I'm not going to bring up the environmental impacts. I'm going to wait to be educated on this. So I am very disappointed, and I feel that's a real fallacy in the presentation here tonight. As I cited in my written comments submitted to you 3 years ago, I don't believe your analysis was adequate, certainly not of the zone of toxicity created from the brine disposal, the visual impacts. I don't believe that's been thoroughly examined. And finally, the intake of the raw seawater. I don't believe that this is consistent with the ocean plan. And I'm going to read from my letter. The ocean plan sets forth criteria for siting and design using technology that will minimize mortality to all forms of marine life. West Basin presented much information on cost savings that it could realize by using the existing power plant intakes with the finer screens, but a clear comparison of marine mortality and habitat degradation during both construction and operation is missing, and that was not delved into tonight. Thank you for those additional comments.
All right, that's the end for the public. So I'll bring it back to the board.
Before we do, President Williams, we did have one chat request in the chat box, and I'll send that over to our acting general manager.
Okay.
Yes, President Williams, given what you had said at the very beginning of the meeting, allowing each speaker 3 minutes, whether it be before or after, we did receive a request from Ms. Martha Camacho Rodriguez asking to read a comment in Spanish for our Spanish speakers. So at the discretion of the chair, it would be your decision.
Oh, that's to the board. Any objection? No objections here. Please, go ahead.
Ms. Martha Camacho Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you. Gracias. Son razones para oponerse a la desalinización. Cuesta demasiado. Un galón de agua desalinizada cuesta el doble que un galón de agua reciclada y 3 veces o más que un galón obtenido del almacenamiento de aguas subterránea. El agua desalinizada no es óptima para consumo humano. El agua desalinizada contiene borro que afecta el sistema reproductivo masculino. El agua desalinizada aumenta el riesgo en enfermedades del corazón. Mata la vida marina. Las tomas oceánicas pueden succionar millones de galones de agua de mar diariamente, junto con cualquier vida marina que tenga la mala suerte de estar cerca. Los desechos son una salmuera salada, un subproducto tóxico que es difícil de eliminar y por lo regular se desecha al océano. Tomas oceánicas, succión agua junta con vida marina matándola. Desechos tóxicos, salmuera salada que tiende a irse al fondo del océano y mata vida marina. Es una distracción de mejores opciones. Los recursos, inversiones y empleos se pueden enfocar en procesos que son más eficientes y que tengan menos impactos negativos en el medio ambiente. Plantas de reciclaje, reciclaje rápido de aguas residuales purificadas. Reducir la demanda enfoca en eficiencia y conservación. Captura la lluvia, captura y usa de agua pluvial. Utiliza demasiada energía. La desalinación simplemente no se puede compararse con los suministros de agua con un consumo de energía relativamente baja, como la captura de aguas, energía subterráneas o de aguas pluvias, o simplemente usar menos agua, lo que se requiere ningún tipo de energía. Energía requiere por las plantas existentes para producir agua potable de varias fuentes agua del mar, reuso de agua de desechos tratadas, agua subterránea, lago o río. Se lleva mucho tiempo, de principio a fin. La puesta en marcha de una planta de desalación es un proceso de varios años. El promedio es 10 años. Muchas gracias por el tiempo y por ser muy aplicados con el grupo que está ahorita escuchando en español. Gracias.
And President Williams, I would like to note that on occasion we have received Spanish speakers for public comment. In each of those cases, we've always had a translation incorporated into our minutes prior to adoption. So there's been a slight delay on a couple of our committee meetings as far as getting those translations, but they have all been adopted by the board. We will be doing the same thing tonight, and staff will also revisit the thought of having Spanish-speaking translators here on site for potential future meetings.
Okay, any other?
I don't have any others unless Rob Brailes would like to speak. Rob, are you still there? Okay, I don't have any others.
Okay, well, we will close public comment and go to the board here. Now, it's 8:30. Do you want to continue on? Do you want to take a break? I didn't hear you. Continue on?
I'm gonna leave and
Okay,
get it on my phone,
okay,
but I would like to make a comment before I leave.
okay. But before you do that, I'd like for the acting general manager to comment on the purpose of this meeting and explain that this is not a decision-making meeting and that we are a long, long way away from making a decision to put a shovel in the ground. I mean, we don't even know if we're going to do that. So we're still receiving information and before we make any kind of move like that. So please.
That is correct, President Williams. As directed by the Board of Directors, staff was given several assignments, of course, that were highlighted in the presentation today. So the project is contingent upon staff's ability to do this, and of course on the board's willingness to move forward or pursue a potential project. As noted in the agenda today, this is an information item. It is intended with staff's recommendation for a receive and file. Under the leadership of the board president, of course, the board of directors, you have formed an ad hoc committee to focus on ocean water desalination, and of course, the information that we continue to provide. Over the past month and a half, West Basin staff has prepared several different documents that are now available on our website. Not only the CBA presentation, of course, but all the documentation that supports the findings within that. But of course, the recent adoption of the Urban Water Management Plan, which takes a 25 look at West Basin's potential demands, as well as the potential supplies to meet those demands. So with a lot of information that is now available, we intend to, again, take a deeper look and bring that information back to the ad hoc. And then ultimately, these ocean water desalination questions and information come up in what's our E&O committee, our engineering and operations. So I would expect that the information that was delivered here today for staff to collect feedback from the board as part of this meeting. It's worth noting that we still have 48 guests on the line, but we have more than, I think, 15 staff members that have been here from the start of this meeting to not only hear the feedback from the general public, but especially the board of directors. So we'll be taking all of these comments under admission and continue to review these things and bring that back through the DSAL ad hoc committee, which will ultimately be making a recommendation to the board of directors. One last thing, and I know that several members of the public did comment about the environmental impact report and questions regarding that. It is important to note that we do have pending litigation. We do have our legal counsel on the line available to that. It is not advised for us to really discuss the environmental impact report unless, of course, we're doing so with our legal counsel. So the purpose of that meeting, I know a lot of people had questions related to the environmental impact report, but that really was not the intent from staff to bring this report forward. It really was to show you the great work that's been done, the questions that are now before you as to whether the costs and the benefits really do meet that point where the directors want to consider moving forward or making another decision. So that's why we're here today.
Okay. Thank you for that, EJ. I understand that Director Deere, you have a comment? You're muted, Director. Unmute yourself. He still has.
Is that better?
That's better.
All right, well, I make a motion that we receive and file.
To receive and file.
This is an information item.
This is an information item. I believe that motion would not be in order. Okay.
I think you're wrong, but that's okay.
Okay. Okay, well, we will go on and take other questions from the board. You have a comment from Director Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to thank staff for that very comprehensive, I thought very comprehensive report and the public's comments. And I know there were some questions and some concerns or questions about the report, and I recommend that staff, or whatever the appropriate means is, to get back to the public that information. There was one part of the report that was referred to as environmental issues or whatever, and the report perhaps didn't address it, but whatever the questions were from the public and concern, I suggest the interim general manager gets back to the public in some way, because it is a partnership that we're looking into in terms of the public comments and also the board's consideration. Thank you, Mr. President, for asking the interim general manager to talk about the purpose of this meeting, because, you know, people hear desal and they think we're here to make a final decision, and we're not. So thank you for doing that, Mr. President, because it clears up what the purpose of this meeting is, and it really was to hear the information from staff and consultants on very good work, very comprehensive work, I think, and it gives us the board information to really look at decision-making moving forward, as well as any other additional information. So my comment is tonight, just thank you for the information. I assume that we will have an opportunity as a board to digest and ask further questions. The night is late. I would suggest when we do have another workshop or special board meeting, it's a little bit earlier, you know, so that board members and public can kind of digest the information and ask questions when it's not so late in the evening. But again, thank you, and thank you to the public. And I look forward to the next step of the process. And it is a process. So thank you, Mr. President, for saying it is a process that we're going through, and we're being very diligent about it, I think. And it takes time to make a big decision like this. So thank you very much to staff, all the staff who were involved in this report. Thank you, Barkev and EJ, and all the consultants and staff who are online tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, who's next?
I'd like if Director Alvarez would go, but I have a number of things, but
You can go ahead.
you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
All right.
also going to have comments.
Okay, great. So First of all, I'm going to try and speak with the mask on the best of my ability. Can you all hear me okay? I think you can. I have a number of things I just want to go through between what I saw tonight plus what I'd already read myself on this. But can you hear it okay? There you go. Oh, down. There we go. Okay. I have to tell, and everybody knows, I'm not a fan of virtual meetings at this point in life, but it is what it is. So one is I want to just say, number one, I do agree with the folks who brought up the Spanish translation, and for what it's worth to you all, I've asked that question subsequently, and I've talked to staff about it, and I do think that we should have had something in real time. And even for myself, I'd like to see when those are transcribed immediately or quickly to the board rather than waiting in the minutes, because I don't even have time sometimes to get to look through the minutes until it's really late in the game. So I hear everybody who said that, and I've already personally talked to them about it, but obviously we're still in this point. Two is I noticed that someone, I think it was actually Craig Cadwallader, had mentioned this report when it did come out, and even for the board, I was confused too as to some of the backups. And I think we did get an email to the board with a link on our website, but it's on a separate area or something. And please, EJ, am I right on this? Right? Because I didn't know where it was. I clicked on the link, and then it looks like it's on some side site or something. I don't know. Maybe you can clarify. Where is this at so people can go and find it?
We will post the link right now in the chat.
Okay. But I mean, if you were to go on our website, where is it? I think maybe you click on desalination, and then you click on, oh, see, Barkev is shaking his head.
And there's a link to the cost benefit analysis.
Okay, and I do agree. I think that the link should have been in the agenda so that people could just go right to it, because they could go to this presentation. And so quite frankly, when you guys sent the email to the board, and I clicked on that and I see, oh, wow, there's this whole other thing, but I didn't know where that was at. And so I agree with folks who mentioned that. Now I do have a question, and then I want to go through a few pages because I took notes here, but what I wasn't clear about is, are the costs of the site included in this analysis? Because to me, it looks like it's about the, the design and construction and so on and so forth, but are the costs of the site included and or the cleanup? Because that's not clear to me.
This is Barkev. No, the cost of the site is not included. And the cost of the cleanup of the site is not included. And the real reason for that is that we don't know what the cost of the site is gonna be. Okay. We could make an assumption, but it would be a very broad assumption. And then secondly, for regards to the site cleanup, putting a cost there, including it in West Basin, it would imply that West Basin would take up the cost of the cleanup itself. And that's not something that has been determined.
Okay. And again, I do understand, by the way, any diplomatic way we have to talk about this, but I just wanted to be clear that I was understanding it does not include that portion, no matter what it is to be. Okay.
Correct.
Now, let me just go through. I marked a few pages along the way that if I had a question or a comment, so I'll try and be brief. This is on our packet, page 20, so I don't know what slide that is, but it's the concept overview with the map. So our page 20, I don't know what slide number that was. But do you have it now? Yep. You know which one I'm talking about? Okay. All I noticed on here, and I think you guys did point it out, but again, the subsurface intake design was found to be not feasible, yet yes, it's in here, and it's the more expensive scenario 2, right? That is referenced all the way throughout the report. So obviously it's much more expensive. It is the subsurface, and yet that's actually, deemed not feasible. And so it's just more of a comment, but that's accurate, right?
Correct.
It's just kind of there for, I don't know, cost analysis, right? I mean, it's not really what we're going to do if you did it. So I'm trying to understand why that's included.
This was addressed as part of the one of those 4 studies that was prepared as a supplement for the final EIR. And particularly this technology, the subsurface intake gallery, was deemed technically challenged for a 20 MGD plant. That's not to say that if it was some other hybrid of a plant that it could be in play, but the geology, the hydrogeology at that time said for 20 MGD plant or 20 MGD production, you need to pull 40 MGD out of the ocean, and for that amount of water, it was deemed that technically infeasible. So for us to kind of foresee in the future that would this come back during the permitting process, would the technology be viable or improved at some point? We wanted to take that step and do that analysis right now to kind of come up with the upper bound of the cost, potentially to give us that lower bound, but upper bound as well for the project.
Okay, good. So I would say to the average person who looked at this, they'd be really confused that we're looking at option 1 or option 2, and obviously option 2 is extremely expensive just off the bat. And yet that's actually not even one that we're really discussing because it's subsurface. So I think that I know you had to probably do that in the report, but it's very misleading if people just don't understand it. So I think that's more of a point of, reference for everybody. Again, and later I did number my slide number with the packet, but on page 24, which has that pie chart, it's not clear to me. There's a big chunk here of green, and it says greenhouse gas offset. But what exactly is that? What does that entail?
That's an estimation of how much the district would pay to offset the greenhouse gases coming off the project itself.
Okay.
And that's on packet page number 23. You would see some of those ongoing costs of $175,000 a year.
Okay, so greenhouse gases mitigation, approximately $175,000 a year, at least in this. But so what exactly does that mean, though, for the person who just doesn't know, or what do you guys have, including in that?
So when the Ocean Desal project was looked at, when it came down to greenhouse gases, we looked at a net neutral offset. So whatever greenhouse gases that imported water produces for getting the water down to our region, we'd look at that, and then we'd look at what the desal project would produce, and the difference we would try to offset. So we would pay the money into a program that would help us offset it with another third-party entity.
Okay, so that's what that is. Okay, and obviously when you go to the larger report on that link, there's probably some sort of background or details on that with these numbers coming. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so on our page 28, which is slide 23. So on page 28, I just wanted to see here, because again, you have the graph and you have this red line, but the thing that you built in here automatically was that we would have a metropolitan rebate. So, we're making an assumption that there's a met rebate throughout a long course of this 25 years, and then it would bump up. And, there's no guarantee that I've heard that we're going to get any kind of rebate of any kind from net. And so I think it's unfortunate that the slide even has it that way, or if you just had one as well without it, because there's a lot of assumptions that were in here, and it put off a lot of red flags to me when I first got to see this, when it got posted. So that's one of them. So it's more of a comment, but again, here's this, saying it's going to be less expensive when we don't know what Metropolitan is going to do or not do. EJ, do you have a
Well, if you'd like me
response?
to address that really quickly. So West Basin's Ocean Water Desalination Program, quite some time ago, worked with Metropolitan Water District, and we were actually incorporated into a desal program, which actually provided an offset or funding to make those projects work. Since then, that program has actually been terminated. Our agreement has lapsed.
Okay.
But as part of that process, we did meet with Metropolitan Water District staff. They did provide us with a letter that though the agreement itself was not moving forward, and it was terminated by mutual agreement by both parties, that the LRP would be available to West Basin Solution Water Desalination Program. Now, the LRP right now is funded through the water stewardship charge through Metropolitan Water District, and they have suspended that charge. However, Metropolitan Water District is accepting new LRP programs and projects, and they have just very recently approved several different projects that they've dedicated LRP funding to.
Right.
So the assumption,
but they weren't desal.
they were not desalination projects. They
Right.
were water recycling projects. So in working with Metropolitan Water District, they are looking at how to fund demand management for the future. There is dedication amongst all member agencies to pay for demand management. What programs and projects that would be included in demand management would be another story.
Okay. Let's see. So I think this is really the same point. Page 31 of our packet. I don't know what slide that was. Page 31 of the packet. The last, on the summary page, the last item did say met rebates and below market interest rate public funding sources. The SRF should be aggressively pursued to minimize the finance costs, which I totally understand. But at the same time, we're wrapping all of these into this whole package and presentation for the board and the public. And so if a person didn't understand all of this, these numbers are not really truly accurate. They don't really reflect, in my opinion, where we would be at, because we don't know if we'll get the types of SRF loans that are being built into this, and we don't know what the LRP program ultimately is going to come out as. Because I mean, my understanding is Metropolitan is relooking at that whole program, right? Right? At this moment.
They're looking at how to fund programs and projects for demand management. That's correct.
Yeah. So anyways, if a person didn't understand the minutia, they're going to, be misled. On page 33 of our packet, just remind us what the reliability service charge usually increases by per year. What's the normal annual offhand?
I think if you look historically, and I don't know if Margaret Moja, our executive manager of finance, is on still, but our reliability service charge has typically gone up, I think, somewhere 4 to 5%. So it hasn't
4 to 5% per year.
Don't quote me on that. I don't have the. I can pull that for you and send that to you.
Yeah, let's hold on that just as far as I don't want to, do anything to come out that's inaccurate. But on the other hand, that probably would have been good to have in here too, just so we understand, because I don't remember off the top of my head every year what it changes by. But yes, so people are seeing a 10%, but what is it normally? So I think that would be really good for us to all have very clear to us.
And then we'll confirm these numbers that for the last 10 years, the reliability service charge, 8 of the last 10 years have been more than 10%.
Really? Annually? Annually?
Annually.
Over? Okay.
And the increase in reliability service charge is not necessarily the overall increase. So it's just one aspect of the budgeting process. So we'll get some more accurate numbers for that. For the board.
I just think, again, it would have probably been really helpful for all of us, and especially the public, so we understand, like, well, what does that mean relative to how it would normally play out if you weren't looking at this project? I'm getting near the end here. So again, on page 38 of our packet, it has this desalination scenarios chart, and it includes on there one of the price points is with SRF, which is a very big assumption to me. And on 39, likewise. Let's see, page. Okay, so page 53. It's just more of a comment. Page 53 of the packet, because it has the benchmarks, and I remember this benchmark, and one of them was a customer willingness to pay survey. I do understand that, but that was back in 2015, and we're talking about things in 2021. So, that's 5-6 years old at this point. I don't know what people think of a lot of things right now, let alone the fact that the economy has changed so much. So it's just more of a point of reference, but that's kind of based on some older information. in page 68. So when we, on the summary, page 60 of our packet, when we finally get to the summary of these costs, and it just has it straight out in here that the cost of desalinated water is estimated to be $2,629 per acre foot. And yet that includes apparently an SRF loan, LRP funding. You know, if I didn't know what we were really talking about, I would think, okay, wow, this is it. This is all in. This is the numbers. So to me, I'm really disappointed because I think that it's misleading. It's an assumption. I would have rather seen, well, why don't you have the assumption and or you can take out the SRF and you can take out the LRP and you give all the different options, but what is it without any of that? That would have been good. And then it did get mentioned, or Kev mentioned, I think something about $3,000 an acre foot if no SRF loan was secured. It was thereabout.
And then the report has those numbers in different scenarios of the cost analysis with the SRF, without the SRF. You know, the 2,600 goes in, you know, that's about $1,100 more than met. There's no SRF funding, which is something that we would definitely, if the project proceeds, pursue. But without that, it'll go to 3,000. So in which case it would be double MET's rate.
Okay.
Without the SRF funding.
Yeah. So page 71, same story, because you got all these numbers laid out here, but again, they've got all these assumptions built into them. So I don't think that these are the best reflection of what's really potentially going to happen. This could happen, but there's a couple of other scenarios. If you don't get the SRF loan, if you don't get LRP, they're going to be bigger numbers. And I just think that it would have been better to be very forthright in these presentations. Even if people can go on to the report itself and find this themselves, I think in something like this, you know, it should just be really clear. And going on to the next page, 72, which was 67 in the slides, but 72. So you've got all the estimated average monthly bills for different areas, you know, parts of our service area. And again, these numbers, of course, reflect having all those, you know, low interest loans and LRP programming and built in. And so again, I don't think these are really 100% accurate in what might truly happen. So for what it's worth, you know, I read through this and I had a lot of questions like a lot of other people would have, but also I saw things that to me just, I want to make sure I understood clearly that what I was reading was accurate. And you guys, you know, you answered the question, but I just think that it was confusing. If I was just the average person out there looking at this, I might not think it's going to cost as much as it potentially could cost. And of course, it does not include, you know, the site situation, et cetera, et cetera. So those are my questions. You know, I want to say thank you to staff and everyone who worked on this, but you know, I just I agree with a number of the things that other people have asked too, and you know, I was confused as well. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, I don't really have too many more questions. I think Director Houston covered quite a bit. But going back to page 68 and is that better? Okay. Going back to page 68 and Director Houston kind of addressed some of these issues. It would be very, very beneficial to actually know what the cost of the project's going to be. And that number that's presented there is kind of a hidden cost. So what would the cost of the project be without the SRF loan financing and LRP funding? Just so that we know what the true cost is. Then on the cost estimate, what's the basis of the cost estimate?
This,
Yeah.
what terms, which year you mean?
Well, year, is it an order of magnitude cost estimate, that kind of thing? In other words, I'll assume it's an order of magnitude cost estimate.
The costs are based on some of the cost estimates that have come in for similar projects. And so the unit costs. So there was a real deep dive into putting together the cost estimate itself. And they are based on 2019 dollars. 2019 dollars, and that's the reason behind that is because we started the study, and it was the baseline of the entire study was first developing the cost estimate itself, and that was done in around mid 2019.
So it's, if you're looking at the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering, you know how they've got a whole range of estimates. You're saying it's a very detailed cost estimate, like based on having a design drawings?
Design drawings, no. There's obviously some contingency involved. This are planning level cost estimates. Mark, could you explain a little bit more, please?
Yes, no problem. It's considered a class 5 estimate, director. So there's a pretty good plus or minus percentage associated with that mid-level range. 30 to 40, 50% on the high or low end type of a number.
Okay, so the number that we've got could be off by 30 or 40%.
The CapEx, yep, that's right. Just due to lack of project definition.
Thank you for that. When I look at $500 million, I think that number underestimates what the cost is going to be. And I don't think we have the level of detail information to really have a refined number. So if we proceed with this, it would be nice to have some kind of analysis that shows kind of the range, sensitivity analysis, if you will, that shows the range of the costs. And just going back to industry standards, we can be off by as much as 40, maybe 50%. So the upfront capital cost is going to be between $500 million and $750 million. And then it would be nice to identify all the unknown costs that are still not defined in that cost estimate.
Of course, and you know this, Director Alvarez, as design progresses, more knowns become available, right?
Right.
Less unknowns, and so the contingency that starts dropping the contingency.
But in order to make a decision to proceed to spend more money on design, which would be very expensive, and we've already spent $65 million to date, it would be nice to know, here's the range, so that we have a little bit better idea than the number that's been presented, which I think is a fairly conservative number, meaning by conservative that it is a number that will make ocean desalination look better than not. So just let's do the sensitivity analysis and give us a range of numbers as to, I think this is the base, this is probably the lowest cost you're going to come up with, but it'll probably go up from there. We didn't talk a lot about permitting tonight. One of the items that the board had requested in 2019 when it approved or adopted the CEQA documentation was the permitting. I think that's going to be critical. And there was one of the slides kind of alluded to it. There'd be a couple of years of permitting, or maybe it was the comment made by the speaker, I forget right now. But it'd be nice to know more detail about all of the permits and the hurdles that's going to be entailed in acquiring the permits. Again, that would go to, if we're going to move forward with this, we really should be apprised of all of the battles that are going to be ahead of us.
Right, and just to your earlier comment about having a conservative dollar amount to make desal favor, I assure you that there's no agenda to make the project look favorable or unfavorable. We have consultants that do their professional estimation to come up with a dollar amount. And then with regards to the permitting, we surely can bring that back to talk more about. I think the current project design, the estimate time for permitting is around 5 years probably.
Okay. And then in terms of the cost of water ultimately to the to the consumer. You talked about the blended costs. So I'm not quite sure I understand completely what goes into the blended cost. And I don't know if you have that information right now, but maybe you can provide that. And then what happens if those assumptions change? I think one of the things that goes into the blended cost is the consumption of water within the district boundaries. So as we move to higher cost water and some potential users then shift to alternative sources such as groundwater, and those ratios change, will that affect that blended ratio? Because all of a sudden, a smaller pot, if you will, the denominator shrinks, and therefore the unit cost for each individual as that pot shrinks becomes greater.
Correct. Yes, the blended rate is a blend of the imported water and the desalinated water. And the assumption here that it's going to be an 80-20% supply mix. And so, yeah, if groundwater would go up, then that would impact the supply mix to the individual retail agency.
Okay, so if we can get, or at least I'd appreciate getting a little bit better definition of all the assumptions that went into a blended rate. Then, you know, you had the greenhouse gas emission offset embedded into the cost model. And I think that's a good thing because obviously in terms of just the energy consumption, this is the highest energy consumption process we're going to come up with. But when we went through and we did a lot of the comparisons as to the benefits, and that's the first time in this presentation that I saw that. So when I was looking at the presentation prior to the meeting, I kept saying, well, these are some nice issues here, et cetera. But it'd be interesting to see how those same benefits would compare with alternative projects, because we're only looking at the benefits here. If we're looking at ocean desal, what happens if we look to add direct portable reuse? And what happens if we look at additional conservation programs? Do some of those benefits also accrue there? And again, if we're looking at overall investment and where we want to target our investment dollars, it'd be nice to have a better idea of how those things compare, as opposed to just saying that there are a lot of positive benefits to ocean desalination. No doubt that ocean desalination is a potential source of water and deserves to be looked at, but it shouldn't be looked at in a vacuum. And I would appreciate some more information along those lines. Possibly it's in a lot of the backup reports that were prepared, and especially the benefit cost analysis report. I think that given that we have a presentation tonight, that financial report is complete and should be available. So some of the members of the audience said it's not available on the website. I hope it would be, but I would like to get a hard copy of that report and all of the reports that have been prepared at the direction of the board when they approved or adopted the CEQA documentation in 2019.
And if I may, Director, with regards to DPR, and yet it's true. Well, this analysis compares desal versus the imported, and not necessarily to the other recycled water supplies. And again, it was more of a potable versus potable type of analysis. Recycled water can't be used for indoor cleaning, bathing, cooking, that kind of analysis. So it was more of a potable versus potable analysis. Yes, there's anticipated changes in DPR regulations that would allow advanced treated water to go ahead of existing treatment facilities. So we know that MET's considering that, LEWP is considering that, treating recycled water to advanced water treatment and then running it 50, 60, 70 miles north and south to their existing treatment facilities. For our area, for raw water augmentation, DPR, we'd have to find a potable water treatment facility to put the recycled water in front of it. So that's something to also kind of consider with the adoption of a desal plant in the area.
But that would be an area that would be,
Flange DPR, that's something else.
what's that now?
Unless you're thinking about flange to flange DPR.
Oh,
that's-
I'm definitely thinking of flange to flange. I think that that's not going to be 30 years away. I think that as we're pivoting in the water world right now, that there are people that are going to recognize that we are treating water to a very, very high standard, and that meets all portable drinking water standards. And there's no reason why we have to put water in the ground here and 1,000 feet away, pull it out, when you can short circuit that process and save a tremendous amount of money. But in the meantime, there is some benefit to indirect portable reuse, and the district is doing some of that. And, you know, I would like to see a lot more of that done. I think that the West Basin as a groundwater and a local water supply source can be better used. Central Basin, as a comparison, is much better used that way and much, much less reliant on imported water. They're not the same basins. The hydrogeology is different. There's a lot of other restrictions here that don't impact Central Basin, but there is a tremendous amount of direct indirect portable reuse that can be increased through better use of the groundwater supply. And that's a potential that I would like to see us follow up on, et cetera, and investigate. With respect to the overall cost, if I understood correctly, if we move forward with this, it almost guarantees that there's going to be a requirement for an annual cost increase. What is that in comparison to the cost increase that we're going to have to bear to maintain and operate the existing system? We have a tremendous investment in a system, and we have a lot of issues coming up in terms of trying to maintain that system. So are we looking at the costs that were presented tonight in a vacuum, or are those costs already including the costs that we would otherwise have been incurring to maintain the system? And maybe that's in the financial report, so
right.
I can read that, but that would be a question.
The way we did the financial condition assessment, as Sanjay alluded to, is we looked at a no desal option first.
I'm sorry?
A no desal. Looked at the financial condition without a desal project first. And that's the analysis that concluded that in the next 10 years, you're looking at potentially 10% increase in reliability service charge. And why is that? There was, a capital expenditure program, more than $200 million over a 5-year span, heavily dependent on R&R type of projects. That's something that the district has been discussing internally for the last few months. That is a factor. As for the CIP expenditures moving past the 10 years, there was an assumption made that made us look at the past 10 years. We spent about $30 million a year on average in the past 10 years in capital expenditures. So we took that assumption and then passed it along after the 5-year mark. So there were certain assumptions made to kind of understand that fell into that finding of you're going to need a 10% increase and then some point in the future a 5% increase. And then, so that's still no desal. And then when we added the desal project on top of that, the question was asked, do we still meet the core targets, financial targets, when the desal project was added? So do we still have those reserves, that cash flow? And the answer to that was yes. Some years you're not going to have them. In other years you are. But essentially the desal project would be paid for by passing through the cost of the desal project to the retail agencies. And then putting us in that financial condition that we would need for our recycled water program would also allow us to implement the desal project and pass through those costs to the retail agencies.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I followed all of that, but
We'll give it
just
another shot.
looking at the ending fund balances, and I'm not as familiar with the model that's built into this, and that's fine. When you give me the financial report that's been prepared behind this, I can read some of that. But it would be interesting to know what really this is targeting, because it looks like, right now we have $220 million of bonded indebtedness. And it looks like we're projected to just continue to increase our bonded indebtedness every year. If we're going to just cover all our basic costs and basic improvements that we have to make just to keep the plants running without really expanding much of the system. So then how much more of that is that going to increase? I'm not quite sure I get the picture out of this, but again, it might be in that report. And then I heard you say earlier, and I just want to confirm it, that for the time being, we do not have the cost for any cleanup or acquisition of the plant. And that's not something that we should necessarily contemplate as being the burden to be absorbed by our ratepayers. And I appreciate that very much, because really it should be the burdens of the people that cause the pollution. Okay. I don't have any other comments, otherwise we'll be here all night. It's already quarter after 9.
Are you sure?
I am.
Really? Great. I'm glad to go last, because all of the things that I was going to ask you about have been asked and answered because of my colleagues here. But one thing that I hear constantly is, why is it taking so long to come to a decision on this project? And I always say that it's because of the process we have to go through. And one of the big ones is the cost estimate. Because we have to, because we are a public agency, we have to spend $1.50 to prove that we looked at 25 cents properly. Okay? So that extends out that part of coming up with an estimate. When you ask for a more estimate, cost estimate that is a little tighter, the only way you get that is when you get down to the PS&Es. Then you know what you're going to be doing. Right now, we don't know what we're going to be doing or if we're going to be doing anything. Okay. The other thing is that we started working on this when I got on the board. I think I was elected in 2015. Metropolitan and Sand District, we didn't know that they were working on this major regional recycled water program, where they were looking at bringing in the one, like LA, the one water. LA is one water. The counties, Metropolitan and the Sand District, same kind of one water, direct portable reuse. When we came on board, that was not talked about. We were talking about that's many, many, many years off. Now, the city of Los Angeles, along with the Sand District, they're looking at 150 MGD water recycling plant, where they're going to be sending water all over the place. The city of Los Angeles, where we buy our imported wastewater from, they are looking at their project as 150 million gallons a day recycled water program. It's all water that is just a short distance away from direct potable reuse. And those projects are talked about with such admiration from the public and environmental community that they have just dwarfed our concept of doing 20 million gallons a day desalination. That is nothing compared to what they're going to be doing. So have we looked at that and we thought about that? How does that fit into our program now with desal?
Not particularly in this study, but it's certainly a consideration for the board to kind of see the overall scope of the different agencies, what they're doing these days with recycled water.
Well, I think we need to, because the environmental community is looking at all of that. And they're saying, you're going to spend all this money to add 20 MGD to the system and do all this damage that they consider to the environment. And that's all you're going to get out of this. Does it really make sense? When either the Metropolitan and Sand District, if you look at their maps, you can see that they can run that water in any direction. They can run it to West Basin, or they can run it all the way out to Orange County, which they plan to do. And then there's LA and their sanitation district with their one water. That's way more than 20 MGD. So I'm just wondering if we're going to put that into our conversation as we go forward, because it's going to take a long time. The longer we take to come up with a decision, the more folks are going to shoot us down and point to, why are you doing this when we're doing this now? You know, so just something to think about. Okay. But I do want to say that I agree with most of the comments that were made by my colleagues up here and here. And so if there's nothing else to talk about, I'd entertain a motion to move on to item number 7.
There is no closed session tonight, Mr. President.
That's why I say I'm moving to item number 7. Oh, I'm sorry. Forget that one. Go to item 8, director's comments. It's too late.
I'll go quickly. A couple things I just wanted to reiterate again, if staff could get us the translation as soon as possible, if you email those to the board, because I'm always interested in what people had to say, and sooner than later, please. I noticed there was a lot of comments in the chat section in here. I have no idea as a public agency if we keep a copy of this or you can forward it to the board. I do not know the legality of that. So if it's available, I would like it if you guys could. Because some of these two are set up specifically for tonight. So it's not even, I'm not sitting at home on my computer where I could, screenshot it. But I think there was a lot of interesting comments in here. I'd like to have a copy of that. And then last but not least, I want to say thanks to everybody who was involved and everyone who stayed late and everyone who's online, because we deliberately tried to make sure we were holding a meeting in the evening so more people could participate. And the hour did get late. But on the other hand, the other option is to hold it in the middle of the day when a lot of people cannot participate. So I guess no matter how we do it, there's going to be people who have concerns. But in my personal opinion, I think it was good we held it this evening and we're able to accommodate people's schedules in a better way. So I'm very happy with that. And also I know staff is here extremely late, but it is appreciated. So thank you very much.
Director Alvarez.
Request to get copies of the written responses to the speaker that submitted written comments. Otherwise, it was a long night and a lot of information was provided. But for the first time that I saw a lot of this information, and it'd be very interesting to see what all the assumptions behind it are. So I'm looking forward to reading the reports. That's it.
Thank you very much. I am done with that. We are adjourned.
Thank you.